Chapter 1695. The fact that Long Yu had killed so many alien demigods had caused a stir in the entire Wild Sandstar Zone. However, none of the alien races knew who was behind this, because all the alien races in the Wild Sandstar Zone had been killed. While the other alien races in the Wild Sandstar Zone were trying to figure out the details, Long Yu had already started cultivating with the others in the area where the time flow was slowed down. Man Xin, Chihua, Shi Yingwu, Shu Chan, Fengyu Xn, and Gu Yixian had all comprehended secret cultivation methods that suited them in the Sun Ting Shrine. Now, they had started cultivating with the others. With a power density that was 15 times higher than normal, they only needed to cultivate for a month to be equivalent to other cultivators cultivating for more than a year. There were only a few months left before the Clear Brilliance Shrine opened. In other words, they had cultivated until the Clear Brilliance Shrine opened, which meant that they had cultivated for 7 or 8 years. Such a long period of cultivation could increase their combat ability by at least 1 level. The power density could be increased by at least several times. As for Man Xin and the other 5 new demigods, they would improve even faster. After all, the cultivation speed of any secret cultivation method was relatively fast at the beginning. Long Yu's own cultivation had already slowed down. After all, he had already cultivated to the 4th round of the Heavenly Nether 9 exterminations. Even with the 15th level of the Divine Rune of Shadow to increase his cultivation speed, he still couldn't reach his previous speed. Even when the Clear Brilliance Shrine opened, Long Yu's power density would only increase by 2 times at most. But this was already very good. It was enough for Long Yu's strength to reach a higher level, and it would be even easier for him to deal with alien demigods whose power density was 60 times higher. 3 days before the Clear Brilliance Shrine opened, Long Yu finally led the others out of seclusion. This time, he was going to step into the Clear Brilliance Shrine and try to improve his strength. On the other hand, he had also brought along 5 other people, namely Ji Tao, Consort Yu, Red Oriole, Moon Song, and the Sage Emperor. As for Yi Ziwei, it was impossible for her to head to the Radiant Church while she was cultivating. After Long Yu left, the area where the flow of time slowed down would quickly dissipate. However, this would not interrupt her cultivation. The accelerated state of cultivation would still be maintained. That was why Long Yu left so relaxed. Long Yu had previously raided the entire Wild Sandstar region and increased the effect of the time flow deceleration area to 15 times, which just so happened that the other 4 people's power density had reached 30 times. Only after reaching 30 times the power density could one step into the Clear Splendor Shrine. It could be seen that this temple probably had something more precious than the other temples. There were a total of 6 slots, and Long Yu planned to take all of them. The other 2 races were the Umbrella Race and the Sky Pillar Race. Each race had 1 or 2 beings with a power density of 60 times. The opening of the Clear Splendor Shrine was a major event for demigods among the 3 races. Therefore, the Umbrella Race and the Sky Pillar Race had made their own preparations. Of the 2 demigods they had sent, one of them was the strongest demigod with a power density of 63 times. The other one was also a powerful being with a power density of 57 times. After all, whether or not a race could become stronger was largely decided by the strongest one. Naturally, a good opportunity like the Clear Splendor Shrine would not be given to ordinary demigods of alien races. Only some unparalleled geniuses would be able to make the strongest demigods give up their positions. Such a situation was extremely good for Long Yu, because as long as he killed the 4 alien demigods, there would be no one in the Umbrella Race and the Sky Pillar Race that could stop him. Also, because the 4 alien demigods were already the strongest, they did not bring other demigods with them. The 4 of them stayed near the Clear Splendor Shrine, waiting for the opening of the Clear Splendor Shrine. For Long Yu, it was a great opportunity to strike. You guys hold the 2 from the Umbrella Race. I'll kill the 2 from the Sky Pillar Race first. After we come out of the Clear Splendor Shrine, we'll have all the training resources of the 3 alien races. What Long Yu wanted to do was, of course, to pretend to be the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race and the Umbrella race. Then, he would occupy the Umbrella race and the Sky Pillar race together like he had done with the Ice Fire race. In this way, the speed of improvement of the people in the Void Galaxy would be even faster. When Long Yu and the rest of them arrived near the Temple of Clear Brilliance, they saw that the 4 demigods of the Sky Pillar race and the Umbrella race were divided into 2 groups. They seemed to be confronting each other in the air near a temple that was emitting gentle green light, but in fact, they were very relaxed and peaceful. Obviously, the 4 demigods were very familiar with the Clear Splendor Shrine. They had come before. However, it was not a problem for Long Yu, because even if they had entered the Clear Splendor Shrine and were stronger than regular demigods, they were not much different from the strongest demigod of the Ice Fire race. Long Yu had once killed the strongest demigod of the Ice Fire race. Now, he could deal with these 2 fellows too. After all, Long Yu had made rapid progress. Compared to the time when he killed the strongest demigod of the Ice Fire race, he was much stronger now and could completely suppress the strongest demigod of the Ice Fire race at that time. When the 4 demigods were not prepared, the absolute space field was activated. A powerful space barrier appeared around the 4 demigods, sealing them inside and making it impossible for them to escape. To escape from the absolute space field, even the alien demigods with 60 times the energy density would need at least half an hour, and that was if they were not disturbed. But now, Long Yu would not give them any chance to escape. Kill them. As soon as the absolute space field was released, Long Yu chose to attack immediately, not giving the other party any time to react. Just like that, several spheres of Tartarus appeared in the field. Countless pitch-black, entangling beams of light entangled the 4 alien demigods in the space. The effect of slowing down the flow of time enveloped the entire absolute space field, causing the 4 alien demigods to fall into a state of slow movement. Then, Long Yu flew toward the 2 demigods of the Sky Pillar race alone, while the rest of the people flew toward the 2 demigods of the Umbrella race, trying to stall them with the help of the spheres of Tartarus. Everything was going according to Long Yu's plan. The Sky Pillar race was an alien race with an extremely large physical body. They were like a small mountain in the void, emitting waves of majestic aura. When they sensed the appearance of the absolute space field, the 2 powerful demigods of the Sky Pillar race each emitted waves of killing intent. They could keenly sense the hostility from the void around them, but they realized that before they could react, the other party's attack had already arrived. The slowing of the flow of time in the spheres of Tartarus made their movements extremely slow, and the flow of energy in their bodies was greatly hindered. Even normal combat was an extravagant hope. However, the strongest Sky Pillar still reacted in an instant. Before Long Yu's attack arrived, its body was covered in a layer of shattered rocks. The appearance of this layer of shattered rocks actually separated its entire body from the influence of the spheres of Tartarus, and it was no longer affected by the slowing of the flow of time. This kind of method was rare even among high-level alien demigods. But for Long Yu, this was not too difficult. I can't drag this out for too long, or something might happen. Long Yu knew this very well, so he did not plan to test the other party right from the start. Instead, he used his ultimate move. Dark Flame Ghost and Death Prison of 4 symbols were mercilessly unleashed at the other party. Pitch-black flames and the aura of death continuously surged into the other party's body, trying to invade it. However, they were blocked by the other party's shattered rocks and could not do anything for a moment. Dragon Breath of Tartarus. Long Yu didn't hesitate to use this Divine Eyes technique. Suddenly, the shadow of a divine dragon appeared behind him, and a jet-black flame came crashing down. This was an extremely powerful attack, and at this moment, it was even more useful than the Dark Flame Ghost Chain and the 4 symbols Death Prison. The other party's shattered rocks actually started to crack even more, as if they were about to collapse. The other party's shattered rocks are purely physical defenses. Be it Dark Flame Ghost or Death Prison of 4 symbols, they mostly deal damage to the mind and soul. Under such circumstances, the Dragon Breath of Tartarus is more effective. Long Yu knew very well why the dragon breath of Tartarus was effective. It was because this ability was famous for its powerful attacks. It was a pity that he had never had a chance to use it before. After all, the other party had dodged it too easily. But now he had discovered its use. The strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race was extremely confident in his shattered rocks. He actually did not dodge, causing the shattered rocks to crumble slightly. Once it started to crumble, the shattered rocks around the other party's body could no longer be maintained. The power of Dark Flame Ghost began to invade, and the aura of death from Death Prison of Four Symbols also started to invade the other party's body. Similarly, the effect of the Jade branding mark took effect right from the start, weakening the other party's power density by 10 times. Moreover, Long Yu had activated his 8 Extremities bloodline and increased his own power density to almost 50 times that of a normal demigod. Coupled with his level 15 compatibility with the Shadow Attribute Divine Text, Long Yu's power density was now equivalent to that of a demigod more than 50 times that of a normal demigod. His various techniques were also more powerful than those of a regular demigod. Even if he were to face an alien race with a power density 60 times that of a normal demigod, he would not be afraid at all. But at this moment, something unexpected happened. Strange patterns instantly shot out from the body of the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race. These patterns flickered and emitted the aura of the power of gods. Then, these patterns actually connected the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race together with Jitao, Red Oriole, the Holy Emperor, Consort Yu, and Moon Song, who were far away. This is some kind of ancient god pattern. Seeing this, Long Yu was shocked. This method seemed to be able to directly nullify the other party's traction mark, and could even cause the other party to suffer heavy injuries. Just try. As for the demigods of the Umbrella race, I'll stop them. After speaking to the women, Long Yu left the battlefield on the side of the Sky Pillar race and went directly to the demigods of the Umbrella race. At the same time, Long Yu also condensed 2 Devil Dust clones. One of them was to stall the demigod of the Sky Pillar race whose strength density was more than 50 times, and the other was to stall the demigod of the Umbrella race whose strength density was more than 50 times. As for the strongest demigod of the Umbrella race, Long Yu would deal with it himself. In this way, the overall situation was clear. Long Yu would temporarily stall the other 3 demigods, and the 5 of them would work together to deal with the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race. After being connected by the traction pattern, although the 5 of them would suffer damage from the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race, the damage they suffered would also be transmitted to the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race. It was exactly this situation that led the 5 of them to come up with this method. Now, self-destruct. After Long Yu started, Consort Yu was the first to attack. However, she did not attack the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race, but herself. Self-destruct. She directly chose this method to injure the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race. Moreover, Consort Yu was not acting alone. When she chose to self-destruct, Red Oriole, Moon Song, and the Holy Emperor also chose to self-destruct. The reason for this was that they had cultivated the secret martial arts technique of the Devil Dust Heart. Moreover, after such a long period of cultivation, they had already cultivated their Demon Dust Heart to the 8th and 9th level. Although they did not have the boost from the Ancient God Seal, if they wanted to reconstruct their bodies, it would only take them a few breaths' time. In this way, they could continuously self-destruct and transfer the damage they suffered to the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race. As expected, when the 4 women self-destructed at the same time, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race also suffered great damage. The rocks that covered his body started to crumble. Moreover, because the self-destruction of Consort Yu and the others had caused their internal organs to completely explode, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race also started to explode inside his body. Under the influence of the traction pattern, any damage would be shared among the 6 of them. Logically speaking, if the damage was strong enough, the first to die would definitely be Consort Yu and the others. After all, their power density was relatively low and their bodies were relatively weak. However, things are different now. This was because if it was purely physical damage, Consort Yu and the others had the secret martial arts technique of the Devil Dust Heart. Their physical recovery speed was simply too fast. Although the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race also cultivated a similar secret martial arts technique and could continuously recover from the damage he suffered, the speed was a little slow. It could not compare to the recovery speed of the Devil Dust Heart at all. This method was simply too risky. However, when the women used it, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race immediately felt that it was troublesome. Its body was constantly being destroyed. It could tell that if it were to step forward at this moment and completely destroy the Devil Dust Hearts left behind by the 4 women after they self-destructed, then the 4 women would be finished. However, the other 3 demigods of the foreign races were being held back by Long Yu. As for the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race, although his body was continuously being destroyed, he still had combat ability. He wanted to personally kill the Devil Dust Hearts of the 4 women, but Ji Tao was standing in his way. Although Ji Tao was not as strong as the strongest demigod, the density of her power was almost the same. When the strongest demigod's body was continuously being destroyed, he really could not break through Ji Tao's blockade. Everything had been calculated perfectly. Consort Yu and the others first self-destructed, then recovered, and then self-destructed again. In the short time it took for an incense stick to burn, they had repeated this cycle 3 times. Every time, they recovered extremely quickly. It was the same for Ji Tao. However, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race could not recover as quickly. His body was already riddled with holes. Even the core of its power had almost been blown apart. The process of self-destruction was very painful, but the women did not seem to have their own bodies. They continuously self-destructed without any hesitation, and the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race was almost in a desperate situation. "Watch out!" Suddenly, Ji Tao shouted and forcibly stopped the 4 women from self-destructing. It was also at this moment that they saw the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race start to self-destruct as well. Moreover, if he self-destructed, the destructive power would be much more terrifying than if they self-destructed. If the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race chose to self-destruct after they had just self-destructed and only had the Devil Dust Heart left, they would most likely not be able to withstand it and would die. However, Ji Tao's shout stopped them from self-destructing so that they could withstand the power of the other party's self-destruction with their bodies that had just recovered. The strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race clearly wanted to use this opportunity to kill Consort Yu and the others. After all, his body was not weak. If he could self-destruct and kill all 4 women, it would be a worthwhile thing for him. That way, he would be able to work with his companions and eliminate this human who had suddenly appeared. However, it was a pity that the 4 women saw through its thoughts and immediately stopped the next explosion. When the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race self-destructed, the 4 women, including Ji Tao, suffered extremely serious injuries. They were all heavily injured by the self-destruction, but their foundations were not damaged. As long as the Devil Dust Heart was still there, they would not die. Although they were heavily injured, the women still persevered. After a few breaths, they had completely recovered. However, the recovery speed of the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race after self-destructing was far slower. As long as Consort Yu and the others seized the time and self-destructed a few more times, the body of the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race would probably fall apart and completely collapse. However, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race clearly realized this and did not continue maintaining the traction pattern. Instead, he directly canceled the ancient gods pattern and stopped connecting it to the women. In such a way, I will be able to kill the few demigods easily. The women were relieved and finally heaved a sigh of relief. However, very soon they could not laugh anymore. This was because the traction pattern extended from the body of the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race again. This time, it was not connected to the women, but to the other three demigods of the alien races. The strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race, whose body had basically collapsed, performed a technique again and connected the four demigods of the alien races so that the four of them could bear all the damage. Oh no! Everyone's expression changed, including Long Yu's. In this way, they would not be able to kill any of them instantly, because no matter who they attacked, the damage would be shared with the other demigods of the alien races. Without a doubt, this battle had become the most difficult one that Long Yu and the others had encountered since they came out of the Langus space zone. The traction pattern. This kind of ancient gods pattern can indeed be used continuously, and it can be used differently in different situations. Long Yu did not panic. He calmly analyzed the situation. Right now, the four demigods of the alien races were all connected together. Although they had shared the damage, it was not necessarily a bad thing from another perspective. Attack tentatively first. Find out which one of them has the weakest defense and launch a fierce attack on it. Long Yu spoke to the women telepathically. This was the solution that he had come up with. Now that the traction pattern was still there, he could not think of any other way. To finish off the enemy, he had to attack with brute force. However, he also needed a better way to attack with brute force. It would be better to attack a demigod of the alien races with lower defense. Chapter 1697. The strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar had connected the four demigods with the traction pattern, which was rather troublesome for Long Yu and the others. However, at this point, Long Yu and the others only had one solution, and that was to attack. Very soon, the girls and Long Yu attacked the four alien demigods together. In the end, they realized that the demigod of the Umbrella race, which had a power density of more than 50 times, had the weakest defense. If they attacked it, they would be able to cause more damage, and the damage would be distributed evenly to the four alien demigods. At this moment, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar had already self-destructed once and could not recover in a short period of time. Even if it had cultivated a certain martial arts technique that could reconstruct its body, it would not be as fast as the Devil Dustheart. Therefore, if they were to suffer the same damage, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar would definitely not be able to withstand it. Let's go. Attack with your strongest attack. After Long Yu finished speaking to the girls, he threw the four symbols Killing Prison and the Dark Flame Ghost Chains at the demigod of the Umbrella race, who had put up a strong defense. The air of slaughter corroded his body and then passed on to the other three demigods of alien races through the traction stripes. Long Yu's Devil Dust clone was still restraining the demigod of the Umbrella race, making it impossible for it to resist the joint attack of Long Yu and the others. Very soon, its spirit and soul were corroded. At the same time, the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar was also corroded in terms of spirit and soul. The dark flames of the four symbols Death Prison and the dark flame ghosts burned into the body of the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar through the effect of the traction pattern, igniting its spirit and soul. At the same time, the attacks of the other girls arrived very quickly. Although their power density was not very high, they were still able to cause some damage after Long Yu's star branding pattern weakened the enemy with a power density of 30 times. This was especially so when the four girls worked together. Consort Yu, the Saint Emperor, Moon Song, and Red Oriole all had their own skills. After adding them together, the strongest Sky Pillar demigod could not hold on any longer. But at this time, one of Long Yu's Devil Dust clones was finally killed by the strongest demigod of the Umbrella race. Then, the strongest demigod of the Umbrella race flew toward Long Yu and the others at high speed. His body spun at high speed, and endless spatial divine characters formed a terrifying vortex that descended from the sky, trying to envelop everyone. Void flow, eternal rotation. At this moment, Long Yu was attacking another demigod of the Umbrella clan and could not resist the terrifying space swirl. However, at this moment, the Void Ghost Dragon Dagger was finally awakened to a new level. The sixth awakening stage. Constant Void Flow was the awakening skill derived from the Netherworld Dragon Blade after it had awakened to the sixth stage. When the space vortex of the strongest demigod of the Umbrella race descended from the sky and was about to pull everyone into it and tear them apart, a flowing space-time domain appeared above Long Yu's head. It was the result of the constant void flow eternal rotation. Then, the flowing space-time domain continued to rise. Soon, it collided with the space vortex of the strongest demigod of the Umbrella race. Although the constant void flow eternal rotation did not seem very eye-catching, when it came into contact with the space vortex of the divine symbols, it directly swallowed the vortex and transferred it to the body of the weakest demigod of the Umbrella race. The space vortex that had been attacking Long Yu and the others was transferred and became a weapon to attack the demigod of the Umbrella race. The next moment, a terrifying power spread out from the body of the Umbrella race demigod and landed on the four alien demigods through the traction patterns. At this time, the strongest sky pillar demigod finally could not hold on any longer. He was torn to pieces by the destructive power of the space vortex. The entire rock-like giant body completely collapsed and scattered, as if it had exploded from within, scattering in all directions. The traction patterns disappeared just like that. Dark flame ghost. Burn. Seeing that, Long Yu did not have the time to be happy about the reawakening of the Nether Dragon Dagger. Instead, he launched a mental and soul attack at the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar as quickly as possible. The dark flame ghost rope quickly burned the physical body of the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar with endless pitch-black flames. The soul of the strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar was suffering endless pain in the black flames. Even after losing its body, its resistance to the slowing down of time from the sphere of the Tartarian abyss was completely gone. It had completely lost the ability to fight back. In less than a moment, the strongest Sky Pillar demigod was dead. Good job, O Void. Only then did Long Yu praise the Void Nether Dragon Blade. The sixth level of the awakening skill, Constant Void Flow, seemed to be able to transfer any attack that was not too powerful to attack the opponent. Such an awakening skill was not much different from the previous Void attack. If it was used at a critical moment, its effect might even be better. The other women also looked at the Void Nether Dragon Blade in surprise. They were clearly surprised, but more than that, they were delighted. In such a situation, it would be even easier for them to defeat the next few alien demigods. Of course, the effect of constant void flow could not be maintained forever. If the opponent knew about this skill beforehand, they might be able to use certain methods to prevent their attacks from being diverted by constant void flow. But the first time it was used, it was definitely unexpected. For example, just now, it had killed the strongest Sky Pillar demigod with attraction patterns in one go. I'll deal with the strongest Umbrella race demigod. You guys go stall the other two demigods whose strength density is more than 50 times. Long Yu said to the women. Then, a solemn expression appeared in his eyes. Even at this moment, he did not underestimate his opponents at all. He was still going all out. However, since there was only one Umbrella race demigod whose strength density was more than 60 times, Long Yu did not hold back anymore. He directly activated the Abyssal Ball, which had been divinized. The enormous shadow of the pupil appeared behind Long Yu's back and dragged the strongest demigod of the Umbrella race into the gap of the turbulence of time. It was almost impossible for him to do anything for the next 3 seconds. Dark Flame's mistake. Only then did Long Yu unleash his trump card. A small clump of pitch-black flames appeared on the surface of his opponent's body. Like a nimble little snake, it drilled into his opponent's body. Following the gaps in his opponent's body, it quickly found the core of his opponent's power. Just like the human tribe and the demon tribe, the Umbrella tribe only had one power core. Soon, that power core was burned by the small cluster of pitch-black flames of the Gloom Flame. The destructive power of the burning was extremely terrifying, and the opponent had no way of resisting it. The defense of the Umbrella race was very strong. It could be seen in the battle just now. However, after his consciousness was pulled into the gap between the turbulent flow of time by the Dragon Imperial Ball of 9 underworlds, he didn't have any ability to resist, and he couldn't use any defensive methods. In a situation where he didn't have consciousness, who could use martial skills and divine abilities? When the Abyssal Ball's divinized technique was used, an alien demigod was destined to die here. The attack of the Dark Flame's mistake soon crushed the power core of the strongest Umbrella race demigod and burned it into ashes. After 3 seconds, when the consciousness of the strongest Umbrella race demigod broke away from the gap of the turbulence of time, it realized to its horror that it had basically been killed. There was no chance for it to turn the tables. For most races, the core of power was an absolute weakness. After the power core was destroyed, all the cultivation of the demigod would be destroyed. Even though the demigod experts could still use the divinized techniques because of the existence of the divinized techniques, no matter what they did, they would not be as powerful as the divinized techniques they used. They cannot even compare to 1/10 of their peak state. Things will be easy now. The Abyssal Ball began to devour. The strongest demigod of the Sky Pillar race and the strongest demigod of the Umbrella race all became food for the ball of the Tartarian. Very soon, they were completely swallowed and turned into nutrients. Then, Long Yu didn't feel any pressure when dealing with the remaining 2 demigods of alien races. Finally done. After killing the 4 alien demigods, the Abyssal Ball also improved because it had devoured the 4 alien demigods and reached the effect of slowing down the flow of time by 16 times. For Long Yu and the others, it would be more efficient in their cultivation. However, what they needed to do next was not to cultivate, but to step into the Qinling Brilliance Temple and try to improve themselves in other aspects. Apart from Long Yu, the other 4 women also needed to further improve their secret techniques, or their cultivation speed would be relatively slow, and it was possible that they would reach the peak after a while, which was not something that Long Yu wanted to see. Therefore, after entering the Qinling Brilliance Temple this time, their main goal was to improve their secret techniques. Of course, if there was a chance to improve a certain technique to the divinized level, it would certainly not be missed. As for Long Yu, he had his own goals. He still had 2 techniques, the Hunter of 9 Nether and the Path of 9 Nether, that had not been improved to the divinized level. If he could get more divinized techniques in the Qinling Brilliance Temple, it would certainly be a good harvest. But at the same time, Long Yu also hoped to get more ancient gods tattoos in the Qinling Brilliance Temple. The traction tattoo of the strongest Sky Pillar just now made Long Yu realize that in a battle of this level, the ancient gods tattoos were already a power that could influence the direction of the entire battle. If he had more ancient gods tattoos, wouldn't he have a greater advantage in the battle? It was not so easy to get useful ancient gods tattoos. Otherwise, Long Yu would not have met an opponent who had a traction tattoo until now. But in any case, a place like the Qinling Brilliance Temple was more high-end than ordinary temples, and the possibility of getting ancient gods tattoos was higher. When Long Yu and the others were outside the Qinling Brilliance Temple and cleaned up the battlefield, the Qinling Brilliance Temple finally opened. Long Yu did not keep the remains of the small worlds of the 4 powerful alien demigods and gave them to Consort Yu and the other 3 women. There might be a lot of cultivation resources that could help them, but it was not necessary for Long Yu. The Qinling Brilliance Temple open. It's time to enter. Long Yu took the women, a total of 6 people, and directly stepped into the Qinling Brilliance Temple. Chapter 1698. In the Clear Radiance Temple. Long Yu and the others stepped into the Clear Radiance Temple through 6 different entrances. As soon as he entered the Clear Radiance Divine Hall, Long Yu felt a wave of clear radiance assaulting him. It was like the warm midday sun shining from all directions. He didn't know why, but he couldn't help but slightly narrow his eyes. At the same time, a familiar driving force surrounded him from all directions, enveloped him, and pushed him into the depths of the Clear Radiance Temple. Very soon, pitch-black spots of light appeared in front of him. These spots of light carried a certain aura that Long Yu was familiar with, which made him realize that it was the power that could upgrade his technique to a divinized technique. The divinized technique this time should be the Hunter of the Ninth Nether, right? Long Yu thought to himself. Except for the Ball of the Ninth Nether, the transformations of Long Yu's divinized techniques all happened in order. So, if there was no accident, the divinized technique this time should be the Hunter of the Ninth Nether. The last divinized technique was the Book of Shadows. That transformation allowed him to control the storm of the power of the 5 elements in the space-time tunnel, which was a great strategic means for him. It was needless to say how useful it would be in the battle against the alien races. He wondered what kind of special effect the Hunter of the Ninth Nether would have after transforming into a divinized technique. On this side, Long Yu was preparing for the transformation of the Hunter of the Ninth Nether. In a few other directions, the girls were also experiencing great changes in themselves. After all, the Temple of Clear Brilliance was a place that only powerful demigods with 30 times the density of power could enter. Therefore, the driving force inside was stronger than that of regular temples. The first thing the girls did after entering the Clear Radiance Temple was to try to improve their secret cultivation techniques. The Clear Radiance Temple didn't disappoint them. Very soon, the secret cultivation techniques they practiced were upgraded to a higher level, making their secret cultivation techniques stronger and deriving different secret techniques with different special effects. The special effects of Yi Ziwei's secret techniques made all the girls extremely envious. And now, the girls also had better secret techniques and special effects. For example, the special effect of Consort Yu's secret cultivation method was that she could enhance both immortal chi and devil chi at the same time when she was cultivating. This was equivalent to doubling the efficiency of her cultivation, which was much faster than before. As for the special effect of Red Oriole's secret cultivation technique, she was able to use the blood-colored divine runes to bless everyone nearby, increasing the strength of those blessed by the blood-colored divine runes. At this moment, the enhancement was only about 10%, but it was already a remarkable effect. For Long Yu, his combat ability at his prime was equal to that of an alien demigod whose strength density was 65 times. With the support of Red Oriole's blood-red divine runes, he would be able to deal with an existence with 70 times the strength density. This was undoubtedly an extremely terrifying effect. As the girl's secret techniques and special effects gradually became more useful, Long Yu and the others' combat ability would definitely become stronger. But correspondingly, the opponents they would face would also be much stronger than before. From a moment he encountered the strongest Sky Pillar demigod with the Traction Rune, Long Yu knew that the opponents he was about to face would mostly be powerful existences with such special methods. There were probably not many ancient god tattoos like the Traction Rune in the entire Wild Sandstar Zone, and only the strongest existences could obtain them. Therefore, 60 times the strength density was more or less a dividing line. It was very difficult for the alien demigods below 60 times the power density to obtain such ancient god stripes, but it was very possible for the alien demigods above 60 times the power density to obtain similar ancient god stripes to improve their own strength. The closer they were to the peak, the stronger alien demigods would be, and the degree of their strength would be much more terrifying than before. This was also something inevitable. In the Clear Light Shrine, just like in the other shrines, there seemed to be no concept of time. No one knew how long it took for the girls to improve their secret cultivation methods. Then, they were driven by a force and continued to move deeper into the Qing Hui Shrine. In this way, some people finally opened the ancient god brain field and obtained the ancient god mark. Some people gained another deified theurgy, and some people obtained a god spirit martial skill. After the second reward, they were greeted with a challenge. If they could pass this challenge, they would receive more driving force and continue to move forward. If they could not pass the challenge, there was nothing they could do. For most of the girls, this was the first time they had encountered such a challenge. Also, the situation they encountered was different from Long Yu's. As the creator of the rain goddess temple, Long Yu was faced with the most terrifying existence in the world and had to constantly hide from the fierce attacks from a void. But the girl's situation was not so complicated. In the clear light shrine, they only encountered a weird human opponent with 6 arms and 6 wings. As long as they killed this opponent, they would pass the challenge. If Long Yu saw such an image, he would definitely feel that it was very familiar. Unfortunately, what Long Yu encountered was different from the girls. Perhaps it was because he had the golden flame, god power, and the 9 hells prison steel on him that the temple had determined his identity to be different. Thus, the challenges they gave him were different. After Long Yu's 6th mystic art, 9 hells hunter evolved into a deified mystic art. His power brought him to an empty space. In this spacious area, countless rays of clear light descended from the sky, like sunlight, like moonlight, enveloping Long Yu's body. Then, he saw a faintly discernible figure floating through the clear light in the sky. This faintly discernible figure did not seem to have a fixed form, as it constantly changed shape as the clear light flashed. Is this some alien life form? Long Yu raised his head and looked at the scene in the clear lights in the sky. He was a little surprised. Logically speaking, this second place should also be a reward, but the current situation did not look like a reward. In any case, it was better to continue watching. The faintly discernible figure in the clear radiance in the sky was sometimes elongated and sometimes shortened. Finally, it completely dissipated, turning into pieces of clear radiance that fell around Long Yu. Then, he discovered that the surrounding clear radiance seemed to have a life of its own. This clear light shrine, is it formed by some life form after it completely dissipated? Long Yu could not help but think so. But now this was completely a guess from the scene in front of him, and it was basically impossible to be the truth. But soon, there were waves of consciousness in the clear lights that were transmitted to Long Yu's mind. These consciousnesses seemed to have been preserved for too long. They were very vague and intermittent, so Long Yu could not know what kind of information was contained in them. Dormant, awaken. Occasionally, there would be 2 clear words, but they were unable to form any meaningful sentences, causing Long Yu to be somewhat confused. This clear splendor divine hall may have existed for too long and is unable to preserve detailed information. Otherwise, I should be able to obtain some useful information from the consciousness in the clear splendor. Long Yu thought, but he found that if he did not understand the information, it seemed that he could not continue to move forward. This made him feel that it was quite troublesome, but since he wanted to understand the truth about the gods, it was necessary to understand the information. In the clear splendor shrine, every piece of clear splendor contained a certain piece of information. Long Yu had to carefully sense it to be able to understand the information contained within. However, most of the time, Long Yu found that most of the information in the clear splendor had been erased. It was not because it had dissipated for too long, but because it had been erased by someone. Even so, Long Yu still managed to obtain some precious information from a few pieces of clear radiance. This information was something he had never heard of before, and he had never even heard of it before. He carefully perceived all the clear lights in the clear light shrine that still contained information. He did not know how much time had passed before he finally figured out a fact. First of all, he could be sure that the gods definitely existed. Second, he finally knew why the gods had never appeared in this world. It was because the gods were either dead or in a deep sleep. As for why they were in a deep sleep and who killed the dead gods, Long Yu did not know. The key information had been erased and could not be obtained from the clear light shrine. Then, the remaining information in the clear light shrine was to ask Long Yu to do something to wake up the sleeping gods. Unfortunately, Long Yu did not know what the other party wanted him to do, nor did he know what he needed to do to wake up the gods. Everything was still a mystery. Although he had obtained some key information, it brought him bigger questions. The gods disappeared because they were in a deep sleep or dead, just like when the rain god and the Jiuyo dragon emperor were killed. Long Yu's heart turned cold. There seemed to be more things hidden in this world that he did not know, or in other words, there were things hidden that no one knew. He thought of the Sufferers Alliance, an organization that was good at refining elixirs. It had not appeared among the human race and the demon race for a long time. Long Yu even learned from his recent investigation that even in the Ice-Fire race, the Silk race, and other territories, there was a Sufferers Alliance a long time ago, but after a certain period of time, it suddenly disappeared. This organization might not be an organization from the 3 nearby star fields. In other words, there are other worlds outside these 3 star fields. Long Yu thought. In this way, his target had expanded. Wild Sand Star Field, Langus Star Field, and Heavenly Dipper Star Field. Was this place just a small corner of a wider universe? He did not know. However, he believed that he would soon find out. Chapter 1699. After coming out of the Clear Light Temple, everyone had gained a lot, especially Long Yu. On this trip, he only had one technique, which was the Hunter of 9 Nether, that had become a deified technique. But this was his 6th technique, and it was one of the advanced techniques. Long Yu hadn't used it after it became a deified technique, so he didn't know what effect it would have. But he wasn't in a hurry to find out. When they were in the Clear Light Temple, the other demigods in the Void Galaxy had been slowly cultivating in the hidden space of the Sun Ting Temple, including Yi Wei, because no one would disturb them in that place. They could cultivate in peace without worrying about what was going on outside. Even if the entire Ice-Fire race was destroyed, they wouldn't be affected. After all, it was very likely that Long Yu and the others would enter the Clear Splendor Shrine for several years. No one knew what would happen in these few years. The Umbrella race and the Sky Pillar race, on the other hand, didn't need to worry. Since the Clear Light Temple was open, those 2 races had already made preparations. Their strongest demigods would be absent for at least a year. As it turned out, when Long Yu and the others came out of the Clear Light Temple, 2 years had passed. This period of time was neither long nor short for the Divine Hall's experience, but everyone felt like they had experienced a long time. At the same time, it felt like an instant. The flow of time in the Divine Hall was truly unfathomable. Long Yu glanced at the girls around him, including Ji Tao, and found that they had all changed a lot. Everyone's secret techniques had been improved. Everyone had made progress in other aspects. My ancient god's tattoo, the Tattoo of Wind, was tested in the Clear Light Temple. It seems to be able to attach a protective barrier to one's mind and soul. This protective barrier is very strong. Unless it's an expert whose power density is 10 times higher than mine and uses a special method to attack the mind and soul, it can't be broken, Moonsong said to everyone. Moonsong said to everyone. However, her Wind Glory rune was only useful for herself. It couldn't be used to protect other people's souls. This alone was terrifying enough. Its effect had surpassed the worldly purity body secret technique that Long Yu had cultivated. In particular, Moonsong had also cultivated the worldly purity body secret technique. With the combination of the 2 techniques, it could be said that Moonsong was basically unafraid of any mental attacks. Consort used 2 powers fused even more tightly. The Immortal Chi and the Devil Chi were originally distinct, but now they began to fuse together. As the grade of the secret technique she cultivated increased, the density of her power also gradually increased. She alone possessed the terrifying ability to fuse the Immortal Chi and the Devil Chi together, unleashing a power that far exceeded that of the 2. Right now, although Consort Yu's strength density was only 30 times, she was able to fight against opponents that were 35 times or even stronger. Her combat prowess was slightly higher than the other girls. Besides, as her Immortal Chi and Demonic Chi fused better, the higher the degree of fusion, the stronger her combat power would become. This was a fusion that surpassed the density of power. It was her innate advantage, and others could not learn it even if they wanted to. During Red Oriole's trip to Clear Radiance Divine Hall this time, apart from upgrading her other divine ability to a divinized divine ability, she had also derived an even more powerful secret cultivation method special effect. With the power of the blood color divine characters, she could enhance everyone's power density by 1/10. This was an extremely shocking method. For Long Yu, it was already comparable to the effect of the octagon bloodline. Besides, this method didn't have any side effects, and it had an AoE effect. However, when it came to the level of demigods, the ancient god stripes and the secret training techniques were much more powerful. Having a powerful ancient god stripes or a powerful secret training technique would obviously be of great help in a battle. The Saint Emperor's gains were rather special. Other than leveling up her secret cultivation technique once again, she was the same as Long Yu. She seemed to have seen some indistinct information from the clear radiance. This information seemed to be related to her bloodline. Unfortunately, this information had also become extremely blurry, as if it had been deliberately erased by someone, making it impossible to see clearly. Besides, she had also transformed the other 2 congenital techniques into deification techniques. Now, she had 5 deification techniques in total, and she was only 1 behind Long Yu. It must be noted that Long Yu already had 3 deification techniques before he became a demigod, and the Saint Emperor only became a demigod after she entered a solo miracle. At that time, she didn't have any deification techniques. It was obvious that she had received a lot of rewards from the temples recently, and most of them had improved her techniques into deification techniques. But she didn't expect that she could find information about her bloodline in the Clear Radiance Temple. Although the information was very little, and could even be said to be very vague, it caused her emotions to fluctuate like never before. The reason for that was because she had always wanted to know what the White Feather Monsters clan was like in the past, and why only a small branch of the current White Feather Monsters clan remained. And why did she only wake up now after being in a coma since the primeval times? What did Geo Dragon Emperor do at that time? Everything was still a mystery. If she wanted to find the answer to this riddle, she needed to put in more effort. After this trip to the Clear Radiance Shrine, Ji Tao's control over the Dragon Emperor of the 9 Abysses' physical body became even purer. The power density in her body finally recovered to 55 times, and the 2 innate mystique fruits became even more mature. Plus her understanding of the eternal level Ghost Divine text. Her combat ability had also improved a lot. In the Clear Radiance Temple, her 2 congenital techniques had become more mature. One of them had also become a deified technique, which was a great improvement for her. As a flawed existence, she was now moving towards the steps of an ordinary demigod expert. If she could achieve the birth of 7 congenital techniques, her strength would not be weaker than Long Yu's. After you come out, you could go back to the Ice Fire race first. Later, I will start to bring the Umbrella race and the Sky Pillar race under my control, Long Yu said to the girls. Then, he raised his hand and built a primeval rain bridge. Then he stepped onto the bridge and led the girls onto it. Soon, they returned to the territory of the Ice Fire race. Long Yu observed the entire Ice Fire race and found that in the past 2 years, there had been a lot of trouble in the territory of the Ice Fire race. However, they were all insignificant troubles. It was just because the strongest demigod of the Ice Fire race was not in charge. So the order in the territory of the Ice Fire race became a little chaotic. The chaos came from the restless members of the Ice Fire race. They wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to gain more benefits, so they stirred up a series of things, trying to seize more cultivation resources from other forces, so as to accelerate their own development. There were such people in every race. After all lives were selfish. Now that the Ice Fire race was not facing a life-and-death situation, the people in the Ice Fire race did not feel a sense of crisis. If the Ice Fire race was facing a life-and-death situation, many people who were willing to sacrifice themselves for the sake of the race would emerge. These people were a headache even for Long Yu. Therefore, when he dealt with the Umbrella race and the Sky Pillar race, he did not intend to kill the other demigods of the Umbrella race and the Sky Pillar race. Instead, he planned to rule the 2 demigods with the help of those demigods. The entire process wouldn't take too long. However, it would take quite a bit of effort to transfer the cultivation resources of the 2 clans into his hands. Naturally, this wasn't a difficult task for Long Yu. All he had to do was to use a few simple tricks, and he would be able to accomplish it. After all, when he showed up, he was the strongest demigod of the two races. As long as his request was not too outrageous, the other demigods of the two races would have to obey. At the same time, Long Yu could only pretend to be an alien demigod. Therefore, when he showed up, the weaker alien demigod could only say that he had died in an accident in the Clear Light Temple, which was a great loss for his race. A year passed. Long Yu had completely ruled the territory of the Ice-Fire race, the Umbrella race, and the Sky Pillar race. He had also plundered all the cultivation resources in them. Therefore, the development results were gratifying. Among the people in the galaxy that Long Yu had brought with him, almost all of them had reached the 7th-rank Great Dominator level and were only one step away from becoming demigods. During this period, another miracle opened. Long Yu used a trick to let his people step into it, and 3 new demigods were added to his ranks. They were Shuai Luo, Qin Yashuang, and Mo Jietian. As the number of new demigods in Long Yu's camp increased, Long Yu himself became stronger and stronger. His heavenly Nether 9 exterminations had reached the 9th level of the 4th round, which gave him 46 times the strength density. Together with the level 15 darkness attribute divine rune, his strength density was equivalent to 50 times. With the help of many tricks and the enhancement of Red Oriole's blood red divine rune, Long Yu could totally resist alien demigods with 70 times the strength density. On the other hand, Liao Lele had refined many special medicinal pills specifically for Long Yu to consume. Their effect was to increase the degree of compatibility between him and the other attributes of divine characters. Originally, apart from shadow attribute divine characters, Long Yu was only at the 10th level of compatibility, but now he was at the peak of the 12th level. Of course, under the special effect of the heavenly Nether 9 exterminations, his compatibility with other divine runes was reduced by 3 levels. He was only left with level 9, but compared to the initial level 7, it was still a lot stronger. At least, when facing some enemy attacks, Long Yu wouldn't be too powerless. After all, the compatibility with the divine rune would also affect the resistance to the divine rune of that element. In the Divine Light Temple, the Saint Emperor and I both saw some messages, but the messages were too vague. In order to understand the messages, I have to become stronger and try to step into more temples. Also, as for the relics of the alien gods, it will be time for me to go back after I can resist the alien demigods whose power density is 80 times higher. A bright light flashed across Long Yu's eyes. Chapter 1700. In the territory of the Ice-Fire race, everybody continued their training. Long Yu did not act recklessly, because the strength of a race was basically divided into 4 levels. 20 times the strength density was the first step. Above the Ice-Fire race, the only 2 targets were the Nature race and the Oracle race. At present, it was impossible for Long Yu to attack those 2 races, because the gap in strength was too huge. There were at least 2 or 3 existences in the enemy's race with 80 times the strength density. They would not be killed by him so easily like the Ice-Fire race. Besides, there were a lot of demigods in the Natural race and the Oracle race. There were at least 100 or 200 demigods. Among them, there were no less than 10 existences whose power density was more than 70 times that of the Earth's. If Long Yu went to those 2 races right now, he would be courting death, so he could only continue his training for now. However, just because he did not go to them didn't mean that no trouble would come to him. In the Wild Sand Space Zone, the Nature race and the Oracle race were equivalent to the strongest races, so they had some dominion over other races. The territory of the Ice-Fire race was only separated from the Nature race by another middle-level race, which was as strong as the Ice-Fire race. A year after Long Yu and the others came out of the Clear Light Temple, the 2 demigods of the Nature race came all the way in this direction and soon reached the territory of the Ice-Fire race to collect taxes or training resources. It was a sign of submission to the Nature race, and it was also a patrol of the Nature race. On one hand, they could collect some training resources, and on the other hand, they could patrol the entire wild sand space zone so that they could discover anything unusual as soon as possible. This kind of tax collection inspection would take place about once every 5 years. Now, it was almost here. When the two experts of the nature race with more than 50 times the strength density came to the territory of the ice-fire race, they immediately realized that something was wrong, because in the ice-fire race, except for the strongest demigod, all the other demigods were gone. When they inspected and collected taxes, more than half of the demigods of species were required to greet them. Otherwise, even if the reception was unfair, no species would violate the rule. But right now, it was only the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race that appeared in front of them. It was too weird. As the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race, Long Yu informed the other party with telepathic thoughts that the demigods of the ice-fire race had all been looted and killed. The few newly promoted demigods were all in the temple and could not come out to greet him. Such an explanation made Long Yu, who had turned into the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race, scolded. It was infuriating that such a great thing had not been reported to the nature race. However, the two beings with more than 50 times the power density couldn't do anything to Long Yu. They could only record what happened here and then leave the territory of the ice-fire race. Long Yu actually wanted to directly kill these two fellows, but after thinking about it, he felt that there was no need, because these two fellows still had to go for a stroll in a further place. And this was the time for Long Yu to prepare. If he killed the two demigods of a nature race who had more than 50 times the power density, Long Yu would have to prepare to escape from this place immediately. After all, the nature race would definitely know the cause and place of their death and come as soon as possible. If Long Yu's reaction was not fast enough, he would probably be surrounded by other experts of the nature race after he killed the two guys. Now that the nature race has found me, it's almost time to leave. I might as well hide in the territory of the nature race. In the meantime, I can inquire about the overall situation of the nature race and the oracle's race and learn the specific strength of the two races. Long Yu thought of something and then came up with a plan. The nature race and the oracle's race were the two strongest races in the wild sand space zone. This plan must not be messed up. When Long Yu thought about it, safety was the top priority. With his current strength, it was not difficult. As long as his safety was guaranteed, it didn't matter where he was. Very soon, a plan was born, leading other people in the galaxy, as well as many demigods from the human race and the demon race. He stepped on a bridge of primordial rain and crossed directly to the territory of the nature race. After passing a few bridges of primordial rain, they finally came to a green space zone. This space zone was the territory of the nature race. This star domain was completely different from the other star domains, which were pitch black and deathly still. Instead, it was filled with vibrant, crisp green light. This was because the nature race's territory was filled with many divine runic origins, all of which emitted crisp green light that decorated the entire starry sky. Throughout the starry sky, everything was emerald green. It was simply intoxicating. This was a strange scene in the space. Long Yu and the others who came for the first time were somewhat surprised and envious. The nature race did have their own strength to occupy such a place and develop it as a territory. However, a race that could develop in a place like this was definitely a race that was more compatible with life and the power of nature. It wasn't the naturals who chose to develop in this territory, but the power of this territory had chosen the naturals. Let's pick a random space and start training. The Ice-Fire race, the Umbrella race, and the Sky Pillar race have already looted most of the cultivation resources. The remaining ones don't matter. The temples and miracles won't open anytime soon. It's the same no matter where we train. Red Oriole, release the seed of Blood Spirit. As your strength increases, there will be more targets that the seed of Blood Spirit can attach to. Right? That's right. Red Oriole nodded. Previously, my seed of Blood Spirit could only attach to alien demigods with 20 times the power density without being discovered. Now, I'm confident that even alien demigods with 30 times the power density won't be able to discover it. That's right. I'll leave it to you to gather information. The rest of you just need to rest and train." Long Yu nodded and gave the order. At this time, it wasn't just everyone else in the galaxy who had reached the 7th stage sovereign realm. Even the followers of the Bone Race and Vestigial Race had reached the sovereign realm. Some of them were even at the 7th stage sovereign realm. Apart from the fact that they didn't have any demigods, the overall strength of the Bone Race was extremely strong. Unfortunately, no matter how strong they were only followers of Long Yu and the others. Of course, Long Yu and the others treated the Bone Race well and didn't use them as free labor. They did let the Bone Race do some physical labor, but correspondingly, they would be given some cultivation resources as a reward. This was already a very good situation for the Bone Race and the others. At the very least, the entire Bone Race and the others were in the process of becoming stronger. Moreover, they clearly saw Long Yu's progress these days. Such a powerful human might unify the galaxy in the future. When that time came, the descendants of the Bone Race and the others wouldn't need to become followers. Perhaps they would be able to fight for a chance at freedom. Following the strong would also make one stronger. This was a matter of course. Moreover, Long Yu wasn't stingy with the members of the Bone Race and the others. As a result, the cultivation teams of the entire galaxy were extremely strong. The White Feather Monster clan had the largest number. Together with the followers of the Bone Race and the others, there were already 10 great sovereign legions. Among them, 5 great sovereign legions were full of 7th-stage great sovereigns. Such a great dominator army was extremely rare, even in the human clan and the demon clan. This was the legion that was built with all the cultivation resources of the Ice-Fire race, the Umbrella race, and the Sky Pillar race. Even the strongest races like the Nature race and the Divine Envoy race wouldn't use so many resources to build a few great sovereign legions. This was because the price was too high. It would be more worthwhile to nurture another 100 ordinary sovereign legions. It was only because there weren't many people in the Void Galaxy that all the cultivation resources were concentrated on everyone. The amount of cultivation resources allocated to everyone was simply too abundant. Even after reaching the 7th phase Great Ruler rank, they still hadn't used up all the cultivation resources allocated to them. This made them admire their leader's foresight. He had actually chosen a human like Long Yu, who had created miracles to follow. He had raised everyone to the realm that they dreamed of, and they were even close to becoming demigods. As long as they had the chance, they could even touch the demigod level. This was something that they didn't even dare to think about in the past. In the territory of the Nature race, everyone hid and began to cultivate. Long Yu had created an area where the flow of time was slowed down, allowing the demigods to cultivate at a speed that was 16 times faster than normal. Under the effect of the slowing down of time, their cultivation speed had reached a terrifying level. Unfortunately, existences that hadn't reached the demigod level couldn't avoid the effect of the slowing down of time. In other words, only demigods could enjoy this kind of increase in cultivation speed. Although they had also spent a lot of time cultivating, only 1/16 of the time had passed in the outside world. One could well imagine the efficiency. In this way, Long Yu and the others could reach a higher level in the shortest time possible. Then, they could return to the human race and the demon race as soon as possible to eliminate the threat from the sword race and the six-winged race. Although Long Yu had used some tricks when he left the Langus Star Zone, it was very likely that the other party would notice some flaws as time passed. If the six-winged race attacked the territory of the human race and the demon race, it wouldn't be good. While Long Yu and the others were hiding in the Nature race and cultivating, the seed of blood spirits spread out and gradually brought them all kinds of news from the Nature race. After the 2 experts of the Nature race who were collecting taxes and patrolling returned, they explained the situation in the territory of the Ice-Fire race. When they sent people over, they discovered that there wasn't even a demigod in the Ice-Fire race. Even the strongest demigods of the neighboring Umbrella race and Sky Pillar race had disappeared. Chapter 17:01. After finding out about the situation, the Naturals entered an extremely nervous state. Although it was only the ice-fire race, the umbrella race, and the sky-pillar race that were in trouble, it was definitely not a trivial matter. Even in the history of the Wild Sand Space Zone, such a problem had never occurred. How could the demigod experts of a race disappear without a sound? Also, the last time they came here, they had clearly seen the strongest demigod of the ice-fire race. This meant that some kind of creature that could impersonate had entered the Wild Sand Space Zone and killed the strongest demigods of the ice-fire race, the umbrella race, and the sky-pillar race, ruling the three races. Under the investigation of the Naturals, they found that the impersonator had indeed plundered the cultivation resources of the three races before leaving. Where was the impersonator now? Would he have any thoughts about the Naturals? These were all questions that they had to consider. Little did they know that Long Yu and the others had already arrived at the verdant territory of the Naturals. They were hiding in the dark and observing everything that happened to the Naturals. If that's the case, we'd better not show up for now. The Naturals are very vigilant right now. We're still too weak to attack the Naturals with our current strength. Long Yu thought to himself. Very soon, Red Oriole sent a message, saying that the blood spirit seeds that she had planted in the demigods of the nature race were being cleared one by one. After the nature race found out what happened to the ice fire race, they became vigilant and gathered everybody for examination. This way, the seeds of blood spirit could not escape the inspection of the demigods of the Naturals at all. They were all eliminated. So we're all blind now. But if we hide here, it's impossible for them to find us even if they want to. Let's cultivate in peace. We've already received the news about the temples and miracles, so there's no need to worry too much about other things. When the temples and miracles open, we'll make a good plan. The earliest temple near the territory of the Naturals was called the Void Wood Temple, and it would only open in 2.5 years. During this time, Long Yu had planned to spend all his time on cultivation. As long as he cultivated the 9 hells of sky darkness to the 5th or 6th round, he would be able to resist the alien demigods with 80 times the power density. Although the enemy was not weak in terms of methods, Long Yu still had the 9 hells ball as his trump card. Also, his greatest trump card had not been used for a long time, which was the 9 hells prison tablet. After the 9 underworld prison tablet became his small world, he had never used it in battle. However, one should not forget that the 9 underworld prison tablet was an incomparably terrifying, life-saving weapon. Even though Long Yu had improved by so much, he was still unable to see through this pitch-black stone tablet. This is a relic of a god. As long as one is not a god, one will definitely die if they launch an attack at the 9 hellstone steel. Long Yu believed this without a doubt, and it wasn't a blind belief. Instead, it was a definite conclusion based on what he had felt all along. The 9 hells prison tablet was his last trump card no matter what, even though he had the 9 hells ball. After all, the 9 hells ball was born after the 9 hells prison tablet swallowed the remains of the Juyo Dragon Emperor's small world. It was obvious that the 9 hells ball was of a higher level than the 9 hells ball in the first place. After that, everyone began to cultivate in the void. In the area where time was slowed down, the speed of time was slowed down by 16 times, which made everybody's cultivation speed 16 times faster than that of the creatures in the outside world. 1 year later, even the new demigods, Man Exen, Chiwa, Shiyingwu, Shu Chan, Fiyu Xan, and Gu Yixian, had reached 20 times the power density. As for Shuel Luo, Qin Yashuang, and Mo Zhaiyan, they were not able to make any progress, because none of them had entered the temple and received any secret techniques. 2 years passed. Long Yu finally finished the 5th round of the 9 hells of sky darkness. He jumped from the 9th level of the 4th round to the 1st level of the 6th round. As a result, his power density jumped from 46 times to 56 times. That was a horrifying speed. However, although only 2 years had passed in the outside world, everybody in the area where time was slowed down had been cultivating for 32 years. It was only natural that they could make such great progress after such a long time. 56 times the power density and the level 17 darkness affinity allowed Long Yu to carry out the strength of 60 times the power density easily. Together with the star branding mark, the octagon bloodline, and the 1/10 of the special effect of Red Oriole's cultivation method, Long Yu is already able to resist alien demigods with 80 times the power density. The level 17 darkness affinity was almost unimaginable for regular people. The other alien demigods could only reach level 12 no matter how many methods they had. Even if they could, it was impossible for them to reach Long Yu's level. His level, 17 darkness attribute, divine symbol affinity, not only increased the density of his power by 5-fold, but it also increased the speed and power of his darkness attribute divine symbols and divine abilities by several-fold when he unleashed them. This was far beyond what an ordinary living being could compare to. However, on the other hand, Long Yu's affinity with other elements was only at level 7. That was only because Long Yu had cultivated the 9 hells of sky darkness to the 6th round. If he had cultivated it to the 9th round, or even completed the 9th round, he would only be left with level 3 affinity with other elements. That would be too horrible to look at. Of course, it would not affect Long Yu's combat ability too much. As long as his darkness affinity was improved, his combat ability would be improved, and the experts that he could fight would be stronger and stronger. The other girls had made a lot of progress, too. The Sage Emperor, Red Oriole, Concubine Yu, and Moonsong had all increased their strength density from 30 times to nearly 40 times. Unfortunately, they had not broken through to 40 times. After all, every 20 times was a qualitative change. This bottleneck was not that easy to break through. Ji Tao, on the other hand, had already regained 80 times of her strength density. After 32 years of cultivation, she had already mastered the 2 innate skills to the point of perfection. She was now able to wield them as if they were part of her body. Her innate skills were no different from ordinary innate skills. As a result, she was infinitely close to the alien demigods who had 80 times the power density. However, we must all be careful. If we run into alien demigods, they will definitely be much more powerful than before. They have 80 times the power density of the Nature Clan. Apart from other things, they will probably have advanced source items, or at least mid-level modified divine source items that have completely grasped the usage of those divine source items. Long Yu reminded everybody, even a Nature Clan with 60 times the power density may have some extraordinary beings. If a battle breaks out, we must not be careless. Understood. All the girls nodded. Although they could not deal with the guys with 60 times the power density in a battle, they had to be wary of them. Even if they were stopped by Long Yu, it was possible that they could break through Long Yu and execute the other girls first. They had to be wary of such a possibility. Ji Tao's power density seemed to have been restored to 80 times, and she had 2 born god power fruits, both of which had become deified god powers. But in terms of real combat power, she was probably only as strong as the naturals, who had a power density of 70 times. That was not even considering the qualitative change after the power density reached 80 times. That was because Long Yu and the rest of them had too short a period of training. It was not because their training time was short, but because they had too little experience. They had been to places such as temples and miracles much less than the demigods of alien races, which resulted in a gap between them. Also, after stepping into the demigod level, the number of battles that Long Yu and the rest of them had fought was far less than that of the demigods of alien races, and they were far from enough in terms of combat experience. Besides, the opponents would most likely have advanced modification items that had been completely comprehended. Just thinking about Long Yu's current trump card, Dark Flame's Error, was enough to know how terrifying it was. Dark Flame's Error was already one of Long Yu's trump cards. However, for the demigods of alien races with 80 times the power density, it was probably just a regular move. There were even more powerful uses to carry out the greatest power of the advanced modification items. The heritage of the Nature Clan was not something that the Icefire Clan could compare to. It was a powerful clan that had existed for countless years. How many demigods with 80 times the power density had been born in the clan? Every one of them would turn into a similar divine source item when they died, which could be used for advanced modification. Therefore, the number of advanced source items in the Nature Clan was definitely not small. At the very least, the 3 demigods of the Nature Clan with 80 times the power density definitely had advanced source items. At this moment, there was only half a year left before the Voidwood Temple opened. This was a temple that only had 16 entrances. There were no other restrictions. As long as one was a demigod, they could enter. Therefore, Long Yu set his target on this Voidwood Temple. Now that they wanted to improve themselves, naturally, they had to think about the temple. However, the upcoming battle with the Nature Clan would probably be the most difficult one in history. Therefore, Long Yu thought for a moment and realized that it was probably impossible to achieve this goal by relying on his own strength. I could try to borrow external forces, such as the oracles. Long Yu's eyes glittered. The Nature Clan and the Divine Emissary Clan had been mortal enemies for a long time. If he contacted the Divine Emissary Clan and told them about the Voidwood Shrine, they would most likely be willing to participate. As long as Long Yu had a way to bring the Divine Emissary Clan's people to the Voidwood Shrine in the depths of the Nature Clan's territory, it would be fine. Such a thing could not be planned in his head. Therefore, Long Yu could only take some necessary things and go to the Oracle's Clan's territory in person. The Oracle's Clan's territory was adjacent to the Nature Clan's territory. They were both extremely vast stars. However, for Long Yu, this distance was nothing at all with the primordial bridge of rain. Chapter 1702. The Voidwood Temple. This was a divine temple formed by countless towering trees. The leaves were lush, and the branches were thick. All the branches formed the divine temple. It looked like a natural divine temple or a dense forest rather than a divine temple. However, it was indeed a temple. There were only 3 days left before the Voidwood Temple was opened. The demigods of the Nature Clan had been waiting in the air for a long time. Now that the Voidwood Temple was finally opened, the Nature Clan was about to welcome another opportunity to improve. After this, many demigods of the Nature Clan who were qualified to enter the temple would be able to reach a higher level. However, the Nature Clan did not know that a plan against them had already been launched. In the past 6 months, Long Yu had led everyone to the territory of the Divine Emissary Clan, and then inquired about the news of the Divine Emissary Clan. Through disguises, communication, and other means, they gradually got in touch with the higher-ups of the Divine Emissary Clan and told them about the Voidwood Shrine. Most importantly, Long Yu relayed the rough shape of his immemorial rain bridge to the higher-ups of the Oracle Clan. As a result, the oracles began to have ideas about the Voidwood Temple. Long Yu's condition was to enter the Voidwood Temple once, and he only needed 1 quota. Therefore, if the operation succeeded, the Voidwood Temple would belong to the oracles completely, and it would be the greatest blow to the Nature Clan in history. If it were not for the primordial bridge of rain, the oracles would not have had ideas about the Voidwood Temple at all. However, after Long Yu demonstrated the primordial bridge of rain twice in the territory of the oracles, they began to admire this method. The oracles wished that their own clansmen had learned this method, but it was a pity that he was an outsider and could not be used all the time. However, it would be extremely beneficial for the oracle race if they could inflict heavy losses on the nature race just by using it once. In the eyes of the oracles, Long Yu was just a demigod of an alien race whose strength density was 56 times. He was not a big threat at all. It would not matter even if they killed Long Yu after the operation was done. Thus, the entire plan was formed. Even Long Yu did not know the specific details. He only knew when to take action. By then, all he needed to do was to build the primordial bridge of rain and let the powerful demigods of the oracles move to the void near the Temple of Voidwood. The current Long Yu didn't know the space-time coordinates of the Voidwood Divine Palace, because he had never personally come to the vicinity of the Voidwood Divine Palace. However, he knew the location of the Voidwood Divine Palace. Although the space-time tunnel couldn't be constructed, there wouldn't be a problem for the immemorial rain bridge to reach the Voidwood Divine Palace. 3 days before the opening of the Voidwood Shrine, the operation began. Half of the primordial bridge of rain suddenly appeared in the void near the Temple of Voidwood. Led by a powerful demigod whose strength density was 80 times that of the oracles, he led 30 other demigods whose strength density was at least 40 times. One of them was 80 times, 3 were 70 times, and 6 were more than 60 times. With such a lineup, no species in the entire wild sandspace zone would be a match for them, except for the nature race. Any species would be crushed into pieces in a head-on confrontation. However, such a lineup was perfect to deal with the nature race. 31 demigods of the oracles appeared in the void near the Temple of Voidwood. Then, a void barrier was immediately established. Several oracles joined hands and activated the array, blocking the space nearby. Be it the Oracle clan or the Nature clan, none of them could pass through this void barrier to leave. Similarly, no information could be transmitted through the void barrier. The creatures outside the void barrier couldn't enter the void barrier either, including Longyu. To prevent Longyu from playing any tricks, the oracles naturally wouldn't completely trust Longyu. Therefore, that was one of the rules. During the battle, he could only watch and was not allowed to intervene. That was why he was blocked outside the void barrier. It was a pity that they didn't know Longyu's methods. A mere layer of void barrier. The path of 9 nether could be broken in 3 seconds. However, breaking this barrier right now will do me more harm than good. Let's stay here and watch the battle between the 2 largest species in the wild sandspace zone. Longyu came to the void barrier around the Temple of Voidwood and observed the battle inside. The intelligence he received this time was not wrong. The people sent by the natural race were similar to those sent by the oracles. 1 demigod with 80 times the density of power, 3 with 70 times the density, and 6 with 60 times the density. They were basically the same as the oracles. However, the difference was that the oracles were well prepared this time, while the demigods of the nature race didn't expect that the oracles would attack them at this moment. They were not prepared at all. Caught unprepared, the nature race suffered a great loss. 3 demigods of the nature race with 40 to 50 times their strength density were killed even more quickly than Longyu did. That was the power of the oracles when the powerful demigods of the oracles joined hands. It's hard for me to survive such a battle, even if it's me. However, it's too easy for me to hide in the back and take advantage of the situation. Longyu looked at the scene in a relaxed manner. Of course, he wouldn't just focus on 1 slot in the Temple of Voidwood. It had to be noted that there were 16 slots in the Temple of Voidwood. He wanted all of them. As for how to get everyone around him out of the territory of the nature race safely after entering it, that was a problem for later. Longyu only had a preliminary plan, and it was not certain whether or not it would work. However, the first plan had already succeeded, which was to let the oracles and the nature race fight each other. The grudge between the 2 races was too deep. As long as the conditions were right, they would never let go of the opportunity to heavily wound each other. Therefore, before his eyes, the 2 demigods of the oracles and the nature race with 80 times their strength density were already fighting each other. Now that the 2 races were both heavily wounded, it was the best situation for Longyu. However, such a scale was far from enough. Longyu secretly sent a message to the territory of the nature race, releasing the news that the oracles had suddenly attacked the Temple of Voidwood. He wanted to trigger the greatest battle between the 2 races. At least 2 demigods of the nature race with 80 times their strength density had to be lost on each side in order to gain a foothold in the end. Otherwise, he would never be able to step into the Temple of Voidwood safely. Longyu's goal wasn't just the Voidwood Divine Palace. He wanted to take all of the other cultivation resources of the Nature Clan and the Divine Emissary Clan. With Longyu's combat ability right now, it was impossible for him to kill so many demigods of alien races with 80 times their strength density at the same time. Even one of them could be dangerous. However, if the 2 parties exhausted each other in a fierce battle, it would be much easier for Longyu. As Longyu's message spread out, the nature race began to mobilize. More demigods of the nature race gathered. Led by another demigod of the nature race with 80 times their strength density, They created a space-time channel and rushed to the Temple of Voidwood. At this moment, the demigods of the oracles also realized that something was wrong. Why had a nature race come to reinforce them? Had they come because they couldn't reach out to the demigods on this side? But why were they fully armed and ready to fight the moment they showed up? Could it be? Many demigods of the Oracle clan glanced at Long Yu, who was outside the void barrier, only to discover that Long Yu was just standing there, perfectly fine. He was not doing anything at all. Even if he wanted to send a message with a power density of 56 times, it was impossible for him to do so quickly. What they did not know was that Long Yu delivered the message through the special effect of Gu Yixian's secret cultivation technique, which was sword aura voice transmission. If it was a short distance, the secret effect would only be a minor martial technique that couldn't even compare to spirit-level martial techniques or earth-level martial techniques. What the hell was sword aura voice transmission? What could it do? But more importantly, the special effect of Gu Yixian's sword aura voice transmission could reach 300 domains. 300 domains equaled 100 times the territory of human beings and demons. Even the nature race's territory wasn't as vast as 300 domains. So, the entire nature race had learned of it when Gu Yixian sent the message. Of course, it was impossible for others to know that this news came from Long Yu, because Gu Yixian's aura was completely different from Long Yu's. Long Yu's entire body was filled with a dense, deathly aura, while Gu Yixian's aura was like that of an immortal. That kind of refreshing feeling was completely different from Long Yu. Therefore, whether it was the Divine Envoy clan or the Natural clan who received the news, none of them knew that Long Yu was the one who sent the news. The nature race came after receiving the message. Seeing that, the oracles gave Long Yu a hint, implying that they wanted reinforcements too. Right now, they could only count on Long Yu. If they wanted reinforcements, there was only one way, and that was the primordial bridge of rain. Long Yu extended his finger and made a 2 gesture. His meaning was simple and clear. He wanted 2 spots from the Voidwood Temple. At such a moment, giving up 1 spot was not a big deal for the oracles. So, the demigod expert of the oracles immediately agreed and asked Long Yu to bring the other demigods of the oracles over. Long Yu seemed to be negotiating, but in fact, he was happy to see it. Or 2 spots. He wanted all of them. Very soon, Long Yu returned to the oracle's territory and brought the other demigods of the oracle's territory. Even the primordial bridge of rain had to pass through a few times before they could be sent over. Also, when they were sent over, they all had the effect of slowing down the flow of energy inside their bodies, which weakened their combat ability. 2 tigers are fighting each other. Let's see if I can take down both of them at the same time. Hiding his thoughts, Long Yu continued watching the exciting battle near the Voidwood Temple. Chapter 1703. The natural race and the oracle race hated each other for a long time. However, it was rare for a great battle like this to happen. After all, demigod experts were usually very cautious and rarely gave the enemy a chance to break through. When the 2 races fought on the border, it was mostly the armies of the Dominators and the Grand Dominators that fought. Occasionally, some demigods would fight, but the scale was not large. Every few decades, the 2 races would have large-scale battles of demigods, mostly because of training resources that suddenly showed up. For example, some ultimate items of creation were born in the source of godly symbols near the border of the 2 races. When those items appeared, the demigods of the 2 parties would definitely show up, and a large-scale battle would ensue. However, this was the first time that the 2 races had a war inside their territory. Neither the Oracle race nor the Natural race could invade the enemy's territory, because the defense was too tight. Only Long Yu's primordial bridge of rain could bring so many demigods to the enemy's territory. Right now, a rarely seen battle of super demigods was taking place before Long Yu's eyes. Even a battle of alien demigods with 80 times the power density was not something that ordinary people could see. Even in places like the Natural race and the Oracle race, demigods with 80 times the power density would not appear on the border of their territory. But right now, They had encountered each other in the void near the Voidwood Temple, and they were confronting each other. After countless years of hard training, their power was finally put to use. However, it was too hard to say who would win the battle. When Long Yu brought over another batch of demigods from the Oracle race, the overall combat ability of the Oracle race even surpassed that of the native natural race. It was mainly because the Oracle race had been preparing for this plan for a long time, and the natural race, on the other hand, had only deployed troops temporarily. Naturally, their battle scale was not as large as that of the Oracle race. As the two parties fought fiercely, Long Yu grew anxious too. He was looking for the best entry point, but he had to kill all the demigods of both parties, which was not an easy task. It must be noted that both parties had 80 times the power density, and there were 2 of them in the space near the Voidwood Temple. There were 4 of them in total. The 4 alien demigods with 80 times the power density were all stronger than Long Yu's. It was not just in terms of power density, but also in terms of comprehensive combat ability. Without the 9 Hells prison steel, Long Yu was definitely no match for them. For example, there was a demigod of the nature race that looked like a gray tree that had 80 times the power density. Several kinds of waves were spreading out from its body. Although Long Yu was far away, he still recognized that a few stripes of the ancient gods were activated at the same time. Even though he didn't know what the ancient god marks were for, there was no doubt that they weren't easy to deal with. Long Yu's Guqin pattern and Jade Brand pattern alone had already established his invincibility among the low-end demigods. Not to mention that the powerful demigod of the Nature Clan had at least 7 patterns of the ancient gods. His ancient god brain domain was open to a higher degree than Long Yu's. Now, even if Long Yu was given 7 ancient god marks, he wouldn't be able to imprint all of them in his mind. This was because the capacity of his ancient god brain domain wasn't that vast. It was not hard to imagine how terrifying the veteran alien demigods with 80 times the power density were. Under the effect of the 7 stripes of the ancient god, one of the oracles, whose power density was 80 times that of the demigods of the nature race, kept bursting out the power in his body and performed one divinized technique after another, resisting the 7 stripes of the ancient god. Even though the number of ancient god tattoos on his body was not as high as the number of ancient god tattoos on his opponent, he was still able to stabilize the situation. I wonder what kind of effects those ancient god marks have. Long Yu thought to himself and narrowed his eyes. Obviously, he hoped that he could have more ancient god stripes. The ancient god stripes were the things that could influence the combat ability of the high-level demigods. When the power density was about the same, the strength of the ancient god stripes and the effect of the ancient god stripes would deeply affect the outcome of the whole battle. In the midst of the intense battle, at least 5 high-grade divine source artifacts had appeared. This was the collision of the top species. If Long Yu hadn't planned the attack of the oracles, it would have been impossible for him to kill the demigods of the Nature Clan on his own. Even he might have been killed here. It would be the same even if he took out the 9 Hell Steel. Such an ancient and powerful race might have a way to deal with the 9 Underworld Prison Tablet. After all, the 9 Underworld Prison Tablet was the remnant of a divine spirit. Regarding the things of a divine spirit, the natural race would definitely know more than Long Yu. Wonderful. Observing the battle, Long Yu saw at least a few advanced modified divine source items that were controlled by the powerful demigods of the Nature Clan or the Oracle's clan. They were using some extremely terrifying methods. Those methods were all like the fault of Dark Flame. Once they were used, they would be fatal. However, such fatal methods couldn't kill their opponents even though they had 60 or 70 times the power density, because their opponents also had corresponding methods to defend themselves. The Dark Flame Ghost Chains were advanced offensive source items, and the demigods of the Nature Clan and the Oracle's clan even had advanced defensive source items. They were not afraid at all, even when faced with the attack of the Fault of Dark Flame. That was the strength of the Nature Clan and the Oracle's clan. The Icefire Clan, the Umbrella Clan, and the Sky Pillar Clan couldn't be compared to the 2 races at all. Among the races that Long Yu had seen, only the Sword Clan, the Six-Wing Clan, and the Machine Clan, the three strongest races in the Langia space zone could be on an equal footing with the two races. They were even slightly weaker than the two races. After all, these two races were in charge of the Wild Sandstar region and ruled over the entire star region. Moreover, they also imposed taxes and other policies on the surrounding races. Therefore, the cultivation resources they obtained were much more than what the six-winged race and the other two races got. Longy didn't know the specific details. Anyway, he had never seen the highest combat ability of the six-winged clan, so he couldn't compare them with the Nature clan and the Oracle's clan. Around the Voidwood Divine Palace, there were dozens of divine source items. Almost every demigod of the alien races who participated in the battle had at least one divine source item. Few of them were beginner-level divine source items, and most of them were middle-level divine source items. In the hands of the demigods of the alien races, even the middle-level divine source items could exert extremely terrifying power, which was no weaker than that of long-used dark flame ghost chains. It was because they had completely comprehended the divine source items and could sense the power within them. They had excavated all the three ways to use the divine source items. Every divine source item had three ways to use it. Long-used Fault of Dark Flame was the first way to use the dark flame ghost chains. There were still two ways that he hadn't discovered yet. However, the demigods of the Nature clan and the Oracle's clan could basically use three ways to use the divine source items. As a result, the power of the middle-level divine source items was even comparable to that of long-used dark flame ghost chains. As for the advanced divine source items, it was needless to say. On the battlefield, many demigods were heavily wounded and retreated to rest behind their companions. It was impossible to kill an opponent completely unless they could kill them instantly. All they needed to do was wait for a moment, and the enemy would be fully recovered and join the battle. However, the number of demigods on the battlefield was decreasing now and then. The first day of the fierce battle passed very soon. During this time, all the demigods were in an extremely excited state and exerted 100% of their strength. However, on the second day, some of them couldn't hold on anymore. Although the power of demigods was limitless, their small worlds would gradually collapse if they used certain methods too many times. It was obvious that the small worlds of many demigods of the Nature clan and the Oracle's clan were collapsing. The four demigods whose strength density was 80 times higher were still fighting with their strongest methods. They didn't seem to be losing at all, and the collapse of their small worlds didn't seem to be in sight. If this goes on, the Temple of Void will be opened in 2 days. I seem to have miscalculated the time. However, the timing of the attack was also set by the oracles themselves. It all depends on whether or not they can achieve a decisive result in the remaining 2 days. So far, 7 demigods of the Nature clan had been killed, and the small worlds of 12 were collapsing. It was barely possible for them to participate in the battle. On the side of the oracles, 4 demigods had been killed, and the small worlds of 9 were collapsing. In comparison, the losses on the side of the oracles were much smaller, mainly because they had more people and were under less pressure. However, such an advantage was not enough to determine the victory at all. In particular, after 1 day, the other demigods in the territory of the Nature clan began to gather and march toward the void where the Temple of Void wood was located. The Nature clan had more reinforcements. However, Longu disappeared at this moment. The oracles couldn't summon more reinforcements. However, the oracles were not worried about that. Instead, they began to make preparations. What they were preparing for was to launch a fatal attack when the demigods of the Nature clan panicked. Longu wasn't here. Of course, it was because he had negotiated with the oracles. Right now, Longu had already gone to other parts of the Nature race's territory and had begun to attack the Nature race's cultivation planets. Even he himself didn't know what the effects of the 9 Nether Hunter, which had transformed into a divinized divine ability, would be. Of course, Longu's influence was relatively small. Under the effect of Gu Ishien's voice transmission, the fierce battle on the side of the Temple of Void wood was transmitted to the outside of the territory of the 2 clans. The other clans nearby were all seething. Chapter 1704. Long Yu was a single person. Compared to the vast territory of the Nature Clan, he was simply too insignificant. However, as he spread the news of the fierce battle here, the demigods of other alien races were all restless. The battle between the Nature race and the Oracle's race would obviously last for a long time. Also, because Long Yu caused trouble in the territory of the Nature race first, the demigods of other alien races also began to take action, taking advantage of the Nature race's misfortune. There were still a lot of demigods in the Oracle's race, and the other alien races did not dare to attack them easily. However, the Nature race had almost transferred all the demigods to the Voidwood Temple for the battle. Although they would soon be able to crush the Oracle clan, in this way, there would be many problems in the territory of the Nature clan. Although the demigods of other alien races did not dare to attack the Nature race, their greed for training resources would certainly take effect as long as such a primitive instinct existed. So, they were still attacking the territory of the Nature race. However, those attacks were all launched in secret at the places where the training resources of the Nature race were gathered. Without demigods, the Nature race could not resist at all. They did not even know who their opponents were. Under such circumstances, the many cultivation resources of the natural race had been snatched away by unknown opponents. It could have been the cultivation resources accumulated by a certain galaxy over a decade, or it could have been the entire stock of a certain cultivation planet. All of it had been snatched away at this moment. In the entire territory of the Nature race, at least 100 such places were attacked. The news was soon sent to the demigods of the Nature race near the Voidwood Temple. What Long Yu did was even more ruthless. He discovered that the 9 Nether Hunters summoned by the deified 9 Nether Hunters not only had the ability to split, but also the ability to grow stronger as the battle progressed. Every time an enemy of the Nature clan was killed, the enemy would become a new Tartarian hunter. Then, the original Tartarian hunter could swallow the new Tartarian hunter and become stronger. Not only that, the deified Tartarian hunter would be a new demigod Tartarian hunter the moment it was formed. How terrifying was that? Long Yu created 10 Tartarian hunters at a time and flew to 10 planets nearby. In less than half a day, all the creatures of nature on the 10 planets had been slaughtered. Then, the 10 Tartarian hunters had grown into demigods whose power density was more than 30 times that of a normal human. Continued devouring. Controlling the 10-9 Nether Hunters, Long Yu continued to devour the training planets that were further away and moved to another place through the primordial bridge of rain. Originally, Long Yu had only intended to attract the demigods of the Naturals to return so that the battle between the Naturals and the Oracles would be relatively balanced. But now, he was to do much more than that. Since the Hunters of Tartarus could keep improving, he would let them improve all the way. The Nature clan had sent a lot of demigods back to deal with the affairs in the territory, but those demigods alone were far from enough to suppress so many alien demigods. On Long Yu's side, the 10-9 Nether Hunters had all grown to more than 30 times their strength density. How could regular demigods deal with them? Besides, with the help of the primordial bridge of rain, once the enemy demigods came, Long Yu would move away with the 9 Nether Hunters and continue the slaughter. By the time the enemy received the message and came back, Long Yu's 9 Nether Hunters would have cleaned up another half of the training planet. After repeating this process 3 times, the 9th Hell Hunters had grown to a level that was equivalent to 50 times the strength density. However, at this level, Long Yu felt that their growth had become extremely slow, and it was practically impossible for them to advance any further. It means that the limit of the 9 Nether Hunters' growth is related to my own strength density. Right now, my strength density is 56 times. It is impossible for those 9 Nether Hunters to surpass me no matter how they grow. Long Yu thought to himself, but even so it was enough. 10 Netherworld Hunters, which were equivalent to 50 times the strength density, could be said to be a godsend for the current Long Yu, and it would be of great help to him in his next mission. It was a pity that even though those 9 nether hunters were growing by devouring, they could only exist for 7 days from the original 3 days. There was not much change in that aspect. Otherwise, long you could have trained and raised the 9 nether hunters all the time to form an almost invincible legion of 9 nether hunters. Nowadays, most of the races only had legions of dominators and great dominators. It was impossible for demigods to form legions. However, if the 9 nether hunters could last longer, long you would have been able to establish a legion of 9 nether hunters. What a pity. Long you put away the 10 hunters of the netherworld, and then disappeared from the territory of the race of nature. The demigods of the race of nature, who had been tracking the traces of the hunters of the netherworld, were still paying close attention to where the hunters of the netherworld had appeared. Little did they know that they would never get that kind of information. It was because Long Yu had achieved his purpose and returned to the Voidwood Temple. The next day passed. There was only 1 day left before the Voidwood Temple was opened. The riot in the territory of the nature race made many demigods of the nature race go back to deal with it. On the Voidwood Temple side, the two parties were on par again. However, because the oracles had taken the initiative, the nature race was still at a disadvantage. If it went on like that, the Voidwood Temple would probably be lost. If it was between an ordinary foreign race and a foreign race, it was very likely that they would shake hands and make peace under such circumstances. After all, it was just a Voidwood Divine Palace. So what if they wanted to share? So what if they gave them a few quotas? However, the nature race was different from the oracle's race. They were mortal enemies. They would never make peace with each other, even if they were all killed in battle. It was exactly because of the investigation that Long Yu came up with the plan. Otherwise, once the two parties made peace, Long Yu would have been doomed, and he wouldn't have been able to leave this place alive. After the end of the second day, the losses of both parties were even greater. Even the demigods of each party, with 80 times the strength density, had fallen into the state where their small worlds were about to collapse, which meant that they had overused some of their methods. It was needless to mention the other demigods. Less than half of them were still able to fight at this moment. There was only 1 day left. Long Yu knew that the oracles were going to take action. Right when the two parties were somewhat relaxed, the demigod expert of the oracles, who seemed to be exhausted, suddenly unleashed an unparalleled, terrifying power that was even more powerful than the power he had unleashed before. This is the power of gods. Seeing that, Long Yu was shocked. He didn't expect that the opponent would unleash the power of gods. Although it was not the divine power of golden flames, he could tell that it was on the same level as the divine power of golden flames. Now that it burst out from the oracle's race, it was the best one on the battlefield. Of course, the opponent hadn't completely comprehended the power of gods. It was a golden power that contained an irresistible might. It was as if a god revered by billions and billions of people had appeared and descended upon the scene. By the way, the reason why the Six-Winged Clan, the Machine Clan, and the Sword Clan knew that I might have grasped the Golden Flame divine power and transformed into a Golden Flame giant was most likely because such an existence had appeared in their clans before, an existence that grasped the Golden Flame divine power. Or rather, it might be another kind of divine power. In this case, it's not strange that the peak-level demigods of the nature race and the oracle's race have mastered divine power. Long Yu's eyes were fixated on the situation on the stage. The opponent's golden divine power didn't have the aura of flames. It seemed to be completely dazzling light, which belonged to the category of the divine characters of light. However, it was much more advanced than the divine characters of light and had reached the level of the power of gods. It even contained some of the aura of the previous god. This guy is too strong. Long Yu was very glad that he had adopted such a method. Otherwise, he would have been dead if he had confronted such an existence head-on. Although a long time had passed, Long Yu still remembered the moment when he turned into the Golden Giant. At that time, he dealt with the new demigods as if they were paper dolls. He could crush them easily, and they couldn't resist at all. Until now, Long Yu still felt that his original body hadn't reached the level of the Golden Giant. There was still a huge gap in combat ability. But now, the powerful demigod of the oracle's race, was equivalent to the golden giant. How terrifying was the golden giant's combat ability? And now, an existence equivalent to the golden giant's combat ability had appeared in front of Long Yu, which made him realize that it wouldn't be so easy for him to meddle in the battle between the nature race and the oracle's race. However, before he realized what was going on, an abrupt change took place in the battlefield. When the strong demigod of the oracle unleashed the power of a golden god and was about to kill the two experts whose strength density was 80 times that of his opponent, a streak of terrifying green light was suddenly released from the Hollowwood Temple. The divine light reached the powerful demigod of the Oracle clan and seemed to be about to shatter it into pieces. At this time, the other demigod of the Oracle's race with 80 times the strength density took action. Countless rays of light flashed and formed a terrifying defense barrier, blocking the green divine light released from the temple. This was the ultimate move that the Oracle's race prepared. Long Yu didn't understand the specifics, but his preliminary guess was that the divine power should have some kind of restriction. If it is used casually, it will incur a punishment similar to the temple. But the Oracle's race is prepared. One of them will burst out the divine power, and the other will face the punishment of the temple. From then on, they will quickly eliminate the other demigods of the nature race. Long Yu saw it clearly. His eyes widened without blinking. He knew that the outcome of the battle would be decided in the next moment. Chapter 17:05. The god emissary race used the power of the gods. Golden rays of light illuminated the stars, and the entire space was filled with this kind of golden light. Even Long Yu, who was far away, could feel the terrifying destructive power contained within. The power of the gods was definitely 100 times denser than the normal power. Not halfway through, but completely comprehended the power of gods. However, this is not enough to make this demigod of the oracle become a god. Why? Is it because it's using the power of other gods instead of the power of its own creation? Sensing the power in the field, Long Yu kept thinking about those questions. Streaks of golden light burst out of the demigod expert of the oracles and darted at the demigods of the nature race. The terrifying power of destruction penetrated through two demigods of the nature race, whose power density was more than 70 times. However, at this moment, the divine light from the Voidwood Temple had already landed on the other oracle's demigod. The divine emissary clan had already created tens of layers of thick defensive barriers. Moreover, they had also mixed in high-grade defensive origin items. Both of them were used in the third layer. The two layers of defensive barriers alternated and fused, forming a nearly impenetrable barrier. If Long Yu were to attack the barrier, he wouldn't be able to break it even if he spent 3 days and 3 nights. But now, the divine light that shot out of the Voidwood Shrine pierced through the two intersecting layers of the barrier. However, in the next moment, the two intersecting defensive barriers switched locations and instantly appeared in front of the Voidwood Shrine's divine light, blocking it once again. The barrier kept penetrating and changing its position, blocking the divine light with different places, until the two barriers were completely destroyed. The divine light was weakened by more than half. Then, he combined his divinized theurgy, ancient god's glyph, and godly spirit martial skill. More than 10 defensive barriers blocked the divine light at the same time. Finally, the divine light was completely blocked and dissipated in the void. A streak of divine light was easily blocked, but the nature race suffered heavy losses. The powerful beings of the oracle killed 2 demigods of the nature race easily with the power of gods. Then, they charged at the other demigod of the nature race, whose power density was 80 times higher than before. Carrying the aura of slaughter, the golden divine power pierced through the body of the demigod of the nature race easily, shattering his physical body and destroying his soul. He went through the most gory transformation in the world from life to death within a moment. All of this happened in the span of a single breath. The oracle's demigod unleashed the golden divine power and killed 3 experts of the nature race quickly. At the same time, the Voidwood Temple unleashed the divine light of punishment, only to be blocked by its companion. Then, the divine power of the oracle's demigod quickly disappeared, and the golden light dispersed as if it had never been there. In such a case, the Voidwood Temple won't punish them anymore, right? Long Yu saw it and speculated again. He didn't have much information, but from a comprehensive point of view, his speculation should be correct. The divine light released by the Voidwood Temple was definitely a punishment for the oracle's use of divine power. It was a pity that it stopped after one attack. Even so, the victory of the battle had basically been decided. That was because one of the strongest experts of the nature race, whose power density was 80 times higher, had been killed, and 2 demigods of the nature race, whose power density was 70 times higher, had also been killed by the golden divine power just now. As a result, the gap between the two parties became huge. Usually, the oracles and the nature race wouldn't even have demigods whose power density was 80 times higher. They rarely met each other, and it might only happen once every hundreds of years. But now, once they met, the oracles were fully prepared and killed one of the opponents whose power density was 80 times higher. The Divine Emissary clan had a complete victory. However, this situation was not perfect for Long Yu. If the Divine Emissary clan won with an overwhelming advantage, then his plan of bringing everyone into the Voidwood Shrine would be dashed through. Also, after the Oracle's goal was achieved, they probably wouldn't let go of Long Yu easily. So, Long Yu began to think that if something happened in the battlefield, while Long Yu was thinking about that, the nature race's counterattack finally began. The remaining demigod of the nature race, whose power density was 80 times higher, namely the gray ancient tree with 7 ancient god stripes, began to emit the light of lightning. Green and purple lightning burst out of its branches, as if it were the wrath of a god. It burst out with an astonishing power. This is also the power of a god, but it seems different from before. It's not that the nature of the power is different, but the level of the power is different. Long Yu's eyes lit up. The golden light divine power that the Oracle clan had just displayed was similar to the golden flame divine power. It came from an ancient god's power, but the lightning divine power of this grayish-white ancient tree was born from its own body. Or rather, it was the power of a god that it had comprehended itself. This power of a god hadn't reached the peak of 100 times the power density, but it already had the embryonic form of the power of a god. At this moment, when it was displayed, it immediately dominated the battlefield. The biggest difference was that the power of a god that it had cultivated itself would not be punished by the Voidwood Temple. If I want to become a god, this should be the key. I need to comprehend the power of a god that belongs to me, and not just use the power of other gods. For example, the golden flame divine power. Long Yu thought while watching the battle. This gray ancient tree had mastered the peak primordial power of the wood class and the power of the life class. It had grasped more than a dozen eternal divine characters, and the green and purple lightning power was a special lightning that was derived from the primordial power of the wood class. Regular divine characters of lightning were derived from the primordial power of the metal class, but the green and purple lightning that this gray ancient tree cast contained the power of life and the power of soul, which made people want to approach it. In fact, the green and purple lightning was not weak at all. The 2 demigods of the oracles knew it when they saw the situation. Then, the 2 demigods of the oracles continued to cooperate. One of the oracles used the golden divine power, and the other was responsible for resisting the divine light of judgment from the Voidwood Temple. The green and purple divine power of lightning, the shining golden power of the ancient gods. They collided immediately. At the same time, the divine light of judgment from the Voidwood Temple burst out, and a green divine light spread out, but it was blocked by the defense barriers of the oracles again. However, the situation was very disadvantageous for the oracles. Because the oracles had to maintain such a divine power, they had to constantly attract the divine light of judgment from the Voidwood Temple, and the green and purple lightning power could be used without limit. We miscalculated. The 2 powerhouses of the Divine Emissary clan, whose power density was more than 80 times, knew that they had miscalculated at this moment because they did not expect that the other party had already comprehended such a powerful godly power that belonged to himself. This was the true disposition of a god. It was not easy to comprehend divine power that belonged to oneself. Even the 3 demigods of the oracles whose strength density was more than 80 times had been working toward that a long time ago, but they had only perceived the power of gods with a density of 30 to 50 times. They were still far away from the power of the blue and purple lightning that was close to the peak that the guy performed right now. They had to kill the opponent as soon as possible, or they would lose for sure. The power of the golden radiance instantly flourished, and it was like a golden dragon that could swallow the heavens. It roared as it swallowed the purplish-green divine lightning, and then it descended with a rumble and swallowed the grayish-white ancient tree nature race. However, as a result, the divine light of judgment from the void temple became even stronger. It collapsed the defense barriers and completely swallowed the demigod of the oracles who was responsible for the defense. He was annihilated in a sea of green divine power. A one-for-one trade? Long Yu was fascinated by the battle. He had never seen such a battle before, and he felt that he had come into contact with another world. It was indeed a battle between the 2 most powerful races in this star zone. However, the situation was not so simple. From where the golden dragon gathered, the powerful demigod of the nature race that looked like a gray-white ancient tree suddenly let out a buzzing sound that seemed to come from the ancient times. The green and purple lightning power burst out of its body again, forming the shadow of a gray-white ancient tree. This is its own shadow. Seeing that, Long Yu was shocked again. The demigods that he had seen before, including himself, would always display an enormous shadow when they performed their skills. They were the shadows of gods or ancestors, but he had never seen a demigod that turned into a shadow by himself. The gray-white ancient tree in front of him was the shadow of itself, and the green and purple lightning power that it burst out seemed to be 100 times denser than before. The outbreak indicated that the powerful demigod of the nature race was not dead, but had made a breakthrough in the battle. The remaining demigod of the oracles was somewhat stunned. It immediately wanted to run away, but how could it possibly run away? Even if it performed the golden divine power, it had no companions to resist the divine light of judgment from the void temple for it. If it didn't perform the golden divine power, it would be dead for sure. Under such circumstances, it was already caught in an absolute death trap. But at this moment, this god emissary did not panic. Before it tried to run away, it blew a hole in the void barrier around it and sent a message through telepathic thoughts, asking the other oracles to run away as soon as possible. It also told them to come back and continue the battle after the situation here was stabilized. That made Long Yu, who also received the message through telepathic thoughts, feel a little strange. The gray-white ancient tree was already so terrifying, and it had comprehended the green and purple lightning power that was 100 times denser. How could the oracles come back to fight? There's only one possibility, and that is it has something to do with the process of demigods transforming into real gods. Long Yu had no idea what exactly was going on, but he believed that the answer to the question would be revealed in front of him very soon. Chapter 1706. 4 demigod-level cultivators. Training was an extremely distant goal. Most of their short-term goals were to increase the density of their power. But there was only one ultimate goal, and that was to transform into a real god. The grayish-white, ancient tree-like demigod in front of Long Yu was the closest existence to a god he had ever seen. However, even though the grayish-white, ancient tree-like demigod had comprehended the power density of the purplish-green lightning divine power to 100 times, it didn't look happy or excited at all. On the contrary, it feels sorrowful. Long Yu was alarmed. He immediately knew that things weren't as simple as they seemed. Considering the reaction of the oracles just now, it wouldn't be easy for the ancient tree demigod to become a god. Maybe there was a barrier between demigods and gods that couldn't be crossed. Long Yu stared at the scene without blinking. He didn't want to miss a single thing, because the key might be at that moment. Even the other women in Long Yu's little world and the people in the Void Galaxy were carefully observing the place where the ancient gray-white tree was. The purple and blue divine lightning that was 100 times denser than usual was constantly entwining around the gray-white tree, embellishing it into an extremely tyrannical and terrifying existence. Its presence was like that of an ancient god that could crush any demigod. Even a demigod with 80 times the density of power would have no choice but to surrender in front of it. But such an existence was vaguely emitting a sorrowful aura. This sorrowful aura made people feel that it was about to die. Such an atmosphere enveloped the entire place, and all the living beings couldn't help but feel the same. It's about to transform into a god. Why is it so sad and sorrowful? Even in Long Yu's little world, Red Oriole could feel this kind of grief. Even in the small worlds of all the demigods present, all the living beings felt the same sorrow at this moment. On the Shunwu world, countless leaves were withering. It was still summer in the Shunwu world, the time when the leaves were flourishing, but such an abnormal situation had occurred. All the humans and demons were confused. What happened? Within the holy city of the 5 emperors, the snowflakes of winter were falling, bringing with them a cold gust of wind. Following this cold gust of wind, a bone-chilling cold swept across the entire Shunwu world. Not only Shunwu world, but even the natural thaumaturgy fruit inside Long Yu's world, as well as the space of nothingness, were giving off a chill that made one shiver. Apart from Long Yu, even Red Oriole, who was in Long Yu's miniature world, felt a similar sense of grief. Around the ancient tree demigod, the small worlds of all the creatures became desolate. The sorrow penetrated into their bones and souls. Then, the crowd saw that the ancient tree demigod who had reached the level of a god was enveloped by the power of cyan and purple lightning. Then, it completely unleashed its power, which was comparable to the aura of the Voidwood Shrine. This was the aura of a divine being. It's transforming. Every living being exclaimed in their minds. But it was also at this moment that a pitch-black vortex suddenly appeared in the endless void. Several beams of divine light shot out from the vortex, heading straight for the grayish-white ancient tree demigod. What? This is... Long Yu opened his eyes wide. He couldn't be more familiar with these rays of God's light. He had once seen the Juyo Dragon Emperor wandering between heaven and earth. His aura seemed to be similar to the ancient tree demigod in front of him, as if he was also in the process of transforming into a god. And then, these rays of God's light descended from the sky and directly killed the Juyo Dragon Emperor. After that, when he went through the test in the Rain Goddess Temple, Long Yu turned into the ancient god who created the Rain Goddess Temple and faced such rays of God's light head-on. Even a real god would have to rack his brains to avoid being killed by such rays of God's light. It was needless to say that the Dragon Emperor of the Abyss at that time and the Gray Tree Demigod, right now, were only in the process of transforming into gods. They were essentially still demigods. Just as Long Yu had expected, the beams of divine spiritual light pierced through the void vortex and instantly landed on the body of the grayish-white ancient tree demigod. Terrifying destructive power erupted in an instant. The grayish-white ancient tree demigod cyan and purple lightning divine power continuously protected its body. However, the cyan and purple lightning divine power barrier was directly penetrated by the bombardment of the divine spiritual light. The cyan and purple lightning divine power collapsed just like that. The ancient tree was bombarded by the rays of God's light and completely shattered into pieces. Just like the Juyo Dragon Emperor, he died without any suspense under such a powerful attack. No, the Juyo Dragon Emperor was not completely dead. His spirit and soul were hidden in a small world, the core of his innate magical fruit. His body was also divided into 108,000 islands and sealed in the Shunwu world. Long Yu thought of these things and quickly pondered in his mind. If it was the god's light that kept attacking, the Juyo Dragon Emperor would not have a chance to survive. Just like the ancient tree demigod in front of him, it was directly turned into ashes without leaving a single bone behind. Even if it was the devil Dust Heart, it should have been completely crushed into powder. The 9 Underworlds tablet, could it be that the 9 Underworlds tablet saved the Juyo Dragon Emperor and saved his life? But who sealed him in the end? Long Yu felt that he was getting closer and closer to the truth at that time, but this was the end of his reasoning. When the rays of divine light descended and the ancient tree's metamorphosis was forcefully stopped, or even completely annihilated, none of the living beings present dared to move. All of them were filled with reverence as they looked at the vortex of nothingness in the sky, the place where the god's light appeared. God's forbidden light. A lot of telepathic thoughts began to be transmitted to where Long Yu was. These telepathic thoughts came from the murmurs of the nature race and the oracle's race, but they were all heard by Long Yu, letting him know that the god's light was called the god's forbidden light. What kind of power was this? It sounded like a power that was specifically used to prevent demigods from transforming into gods. It might even be a power that was used to kill gods. However, shouldn't gods be the existence that stood at the peak of this world? Why would there be such a power that could kill gods and stop demigods from transforming into gods? Was this a natural power between heaven and earth? Long Yu had no idea at all, because he could not feel anything from the vortex where the god's forbidden light appeared. There was only nothingness in it, as if the god's forbidden light was born out of nothing. The ancient tree demigod was dead. Not even its bones were left. But the surrounding demigods did not move at all. They were afraid of the god's forbidden light. Although they had not reached the level of the ancient tree, they knew too little about the god's forbidden light, and they were afraid that the god's forbidden light would kill all the living beings around it. In fact, Long Yu found that the vortex had disappeared without him knowing. The ancient tree was the only target of the god's forbidden light. It seemed that the other living beings were not qualified to be the targets of the god's forbidden light at all. However, no one dared to move recklessly. Naturally, Long Yu would not stand out. Besides, he was still too weak compared to the demigods of the nature race and the oracle's race. It would be best if he did not attract their attention. Very soon, as time went by, many demigods finally came back to themselves. The demigod of the oracle's race, with 80 times the strength density, finally gave an order, ordering the remaining demigods of the oracle's race to continue attacking the nature race around the Temple of Voidwood. At this moment, the 2 demigods of the nature race, with 80 times the strength density, had already been killed. The remaining demigod of the oracle's race, with golden divine power, could totally dominate the battlefield in this area. It's about time to take action. Thinking to himself, Long Yu carefully analyzed the situation in front of him. Both the nature race and the oracle's race had 3 demigods with 80 times the strength density. Now that they had lost 3 of them, there were still 3 left, and one of their strongest demigods had not arrived yet. However, they should arrive soon, because such a fierce battle was extremely rare for both the nature race and the oracle's race. Leaving aside the oracle's race, it would take them at least a few days to arrive, even if they rushed over as fast as they could. However, the Temple of Voidwood was in the territory of the nature race, and the strongest demigod of the nature race would arrive soon. As he expected, when the demigods of the oracles attacked the demigods of the nature clan again, the exit of a colorful space-time pathway appeared in the void not far away. From the pathway, a silver ancient tree slowly walked out. The strongest demigod of the nature race with 90 times the strength density. The appearance of the ancient silver tree represented the highest combat power of the nature clan, as well as the highest combat power of the entire Wild Sandstar field. Long Yu could feel that within the body of this ancient silver tree, there seemed to be a power similar to that of the cyan-purple, lightning divine power of the gray-white ancient tree. However, it should not be able to perform it. Otherwise, it was very likely that the light of the divine prohibition would be triggered again. Even the strongest demigod could not resist the killing of the light of the divine prohibition. However, even if it relied on other methods, the silver ancient tree was enough to deal with the demigod of the oracle's race with 85 times the strength density. The situation on the battlefield changed again, and a fierce battle was about to break out. At this moment, it was time for Long Yu to show up. The Temple of Voidwood will open in the last 2 hours. Get ready. There are exactly 16 demigods on our side, and they will take up all the spots in the Temple of Voidwood. The corners of Long Yu's mouth curled, and he was ready to take action at any time. Chapter 1707. Of course, Long Yu wouldn't just charge forward and be caught in a chaotic battle. His strength density was 56 times higher than normal. Together with his other methods, his strength density was around 80 times. However, he was still not as good as the seasoned alien experts in terms of methods. The Great Tree, for example, had 7 different stripes of the ancient gods, which gave it a great advantage in the battle. Even so, it was not enough to win the battle. If Long Yu got involved, he would definitely be killed. However, he could wait for an opportunity. When the Voidwood Temple was opened, it was possible for him to break into the Voidwood Temple at any time if the battle was still ongoing. For Long Yu, it was an opportunity. It was not easy for him to kill the demigods, but it was still possible for him to control them and allow his people to occupy the slots in the Temple of Hollowwood. Naturally, he would have to rely on the technique of the Sphere of Tartareth. Of course, if he used it now, he wouldn't be able to deal with the demigods later. However, Long Yu was confident that he would improve a lot after entering the Voidwood Temple. If he came out again, he would be able to fight the strongest demigods of the nature race and the oracle's race. Also, he was certain that no matter what the situation was like when he entered the Voidwood Temple, there would be only one race left when he came out. That was because the trip to the Voidwood Temple would take at least a year. A year's time was enough for the race of nature and the race of oracles to decide the winner. After all, both sides had suffered heavy losses, which was naturally a good thing for Long Yu. There were only 3 powerful demigods left, which were more than 80 times the power density. For Long Yu, it was completely possible to deal with them. The 2 races had been fighting against each other all the time. Even if the Voidwood Temple was occupied by Long Yu, they wouldn't work together. After all, it was just a temple. How many temples had the 2 races gone through in the past thousands of years? In comparison, this was the best opportunity to annihilate the enemy's race. For the naturals, 1 powerful demigod had been killed by the oracles, and another demigod was still trapped in their territory. It was impossible for them to leave. Therefore, it was not impossible for them to take the opportunity to annihilate them. For the oracles, 2 of the strongest demigods of the Nature Clan had been killed. Although the remaining demigod was the strongest, it was not invincible. All in all, the losses on both sides were within a controllable range. However, both sides wanted to take a step further and completely defeat the other side. With Long Yu's participation, both sides found an opportunity that they had not found for thousands of years. The fierce battle continued. Demigods of the naturals and the oracles were dying non-stop, but they did not care at all. With everything coming to this point, both parties had to try their best. The 2 giants of the wild sand space zone had to decide a winner this time. Soon, the Voidwood Divine Palace officially opened. Countless green branches extended from the temple to all directions, covering the entire void and even passing through the battlefield where the demigods of the 2 races were fighting. 16 hollow branches extended out. They were the 16 entrances to the entire temple of Hollowwood. At this moment, the people of the naturals and the oracles all took action. However, Long Yu had been prepared for this moment. "Let's go." Long Yu gave a low shout and sent everyone out of the small world. Then, he had the Nether Void Dragon Blade activate Void Traversal, sending everyone to one of the Void with Divine Palace entrances. The demigods of the naturals and the oracles were all shocked. Why did the insignificant being who had been observing suddenly release 15 demigods? Together with himself, There were 16 of them in total. Was he trying to occupy all the spots in the Temple of Hollowwood? Naturally, they would not allow Long Yu and the rest of them to break into the Temple of Hollowwood. However, when they were about to take action, the shadow of an enormous black eye appeared behind Long Yu, and a terrifying power of time spread out, dragging the demigods of the naturals and the oracles into the gap of time. Long Yu and the rest of them had the time of 3 seconds, which was enough. At first, Long Yu came to the wild sand space zone with Consort Yu, Jitao, the Saint Emperor, Red Oriole, Moon Song, and Yizi Wei. Later, 2 batches of demigods were born in the Ice-Fire Race's territory, and there were 9 demigods in total. Unfortunately, it was best for Yizi Wei not to go to the lookout right now. Although she had cultivated for the equivalent of 30 to 40 years, she still hadn't reached the peak. As long as she cultivated for another 10 years, she should be able to do so. If she were in the zone where time was slowed down by Long Yu, it would only be 1 year. However, the Temple of Hollowwood was a place that Long Yu had to go to. Having no other choice, Yizi Wei could only stay in Long Yu's small world. Therefore, the 15 entrances to the Temple of Hollowwood were all taken by Long Yu. There is only 1 entrance left, and since Long Yu did not have that many demigods on his side, he could only give it up. As for who stepped into it, it had nothing to do with Long Yu. After the time of 3 seconds, all 15 of them had stepped into the Temple of Hollowwood and occupied the 15 entrances of the temple. Before entering, Long Yu had already told them to come out a little later. They had to let Long Yu come out first. Otherwise, he would definitely be easily killed by the Nature Clan or the God Envoy clan. Therefore, the trip was rather stressful for Long Yu. He had to consume the driving force that the Temple of Hollowwood provided as quickly as possible and improve himself enough. Otherwise, he would not be able to defeat the strongest demigods of the naturals and the oracles, even if he came out. Keep it up. Long Yu secretly said this to himself, as well as to the others. Slowly, under the cover of countless emerald green vines, Long Yu had already arrived at the first reward checkpoint. Shadow attribute light. Dots kept appearing from the green vines. He knew that this was his last innate mystique becoming a deified mystique. Previously, when the 9 Hell Hunters mystique became a deified mystique, it had consumed a lot of his energy. It was equivalent to the 2 rewards he had received when he entered the temple. Now, the last path of 9, Nether must have consumed a lot of driving force, too. That's it. Let's begin. Long Yu wasn't picky. If there was an opportunity, he would grab it. At least this way, all 8 of his connate skills would be deified skills. And he didn't know what the deified effects of the path of the 9 underworld would be. It's a shame that the 10 Hunters of Tartars that I prepared earlier were not put to use. I planned to use them in a head-on clash, but I didn't expect that there would be powers such as the Light of Judgment and the Light of Prohibition. Long Yu shook his head and focused on learning the deified techniques. Time passed in the temple, and no cultivator knew how much time had passed. Long Yu's congenital techniques of the Path of 9 Nether were gradually understood in this process. They were deified by the mysterious power in the temple, and they became the strongest techniques. Then, Long Yu's driving force was almost used up, but then, he came to the first checkpoint. This time, it was different from what he had seen before. Maybe it was because he had seen the Light of Judgment and the Light of Prohibition, but what appeared in front of him were 2 different colors. One of them had an aura reminiscent of the Judgment Godlight, while the other seemed to be the Forbidden Godlight. 2 types of light appeared in front of Long Yu. Then, in the emerald green void in front of him, they collided with each other. The terrifying destructive power sent Long Yu flying, and he heavily smashed into a thick emerald green vine behind him. Long Yu used the deified technique of the Eyes of Shadow with difficulty, because he could not see what was going on with his naked eyes. The Light of Prohibition and the Light of Judgment were opposite to each other, and they were clashing with each other at this moment. And it seemed that the Light of Judgment was at a complete disadvantage and was completely suppressed by the Light of Prohibition. What I need to do is to help the Light of Judgment defeat the Light of Prohibition. Long Yu thought. The light of judgment was shot out from the temple, and it seemed to be aimed at demigods who used power that did not belong to them. The light of prohibition, on the other hand, came from the swirl of nothingness in the sky, and it was aimed at the deities who were about to transform. To Long Yu, these two types of energy did not seem to be friendly. But Long Yu knew that since the light of judgment and the light of prohibition clashed with each other, it meant that they were not from the same existence. The light of judgment comes from the temple, and it should represent the will of the ancient deity who created the temple. What about the light of prohibition? Long Yu wasn't sure at the moment, and he could only guess. His choice now was to help the light of judgment, because he was currently in the Void Wood Temple. Of course, he had to choose from a Void Wood Temple standpoint. The Netherworld divine characters and Hell, shocking divine characters burst out of Long Yu's body, and the dark flame lone ghost's pitch black flames instantly ignited as well. Even though the yellow and white lights were dazzling, wisps of pitch black gradually erupted and surrounded the light of prohibition from another direction. Long Yu could feel the terrifying power contained in the light of prohibition when he was facing it. This seems to be a light that specializes in restraining the power of deities. The golden flame divine power in my body seemed to be afraid when it approached the light of prohibition. But my netherworld divine characters, Hell, shocking divine characters, and dark flame lone ghost didn't produce such emotions. I can see that the light of prohibition is only aimed at deities. Very quickly, Long Yu discovered this and increased his power. Countless pitch-black powers slowly wrapped around the divine taboo light. Following that, Long Yu sensed that the divine taboo light was indeed starting to weaken. The light of judgment finally gained the upper hand with Long Yu's help. Chapter 1708. When Long Yu was helping the divine light of judgment to resist the forbidden light of divinity outside the Voidwood Shrine, the Nature Clan and the Oracle Clan were still fighting against each other. Although the two clans were furious that someone had entered the Voidwood Shrine, the most important thing for them was to kill the other party. It was not a big deal to be taken advantage of by other races. In their eyes, Long Yu and the others were too weak to withstand a single blow. However, they didn't know what level Long Yu's true strength had reached. They thought that he was just like what he looked like, and that he only had a 56 times power density. The conflict between the Naturals and the Oracles broke out. On the Oracle's side, the strongest demigod led an army of hundreds of Dominators and launched an attack against the Naturals, all the way to the Voidwood Temple. They would arrive in less than 3 months. On the other side, the strongest demigod of the Naturals, who had 90 times the strength density, was fighting against the demigod of the Oracles, who had 85 times the strength density. Although the two parties had a difference of 5 times, it was hard to tell who would win. When it seemed that it could not resist anymore, the demigod of the Oracles led the other demigods of the same race and started to retreat. It seemed that they wanted to rendezvous with the strongest demigod of the Oracles. However, the strongest demigod of the Naturals certainly would not let them retreat like that. A spatial barrier instantly appeared and covered the nearby space zone. Far away, several primeval divine arrays were also activated. After the primeval divine arrays were activated, the power of all kinds of eternal divine characters condensed into light beams and launched attacks at the demigod of the Oracles in this space zone. 3 months later, when the strongest demigod of the Oracles finally attacked the space where the Temple of Voidwood was, they discovered that the other demigods of the Oracles were basically all dead. The last demigod of the Oracles, whose power density was 85 times higher, was struggling to survive. Fury filled the mind of the strongest demigod of the Oracles. It was also a powerful being with 90 times the strength density. Moreover, he was the best in all aspects of the Wild Sandstar region. He had 4 Ancient Gods marks and 2 high-tier source items. His overall combat ability far exceeded that of Long Yu. He had ruled this star region for far too long, and it had been a long time since he had been challenged like this. The enmity between them and the Nature Clan had existed since ancient times. Now was the time to settle this grudge. The strongest demigods of the two parties had finally met, and the most intense battle in the entire space zone was about to break out. On the other hand, the oracles were only left with the demigod whose power density was 85 times higher. The other demigods that it brought over were all dead. In comparison, the naturals still had many demigods whose power density was 70 times higher. Other than the collision of the strongest demigods of the two races, the other forces of the two races, which were about the same, began to collide too. An even more intense battle began after Long Yu stepped into the Temple of Voidwood, and it was getting fiercer and fiercer. In such a battle, the neighboring races who dared to loot the territory of the naturals together with Long Yu did not dare to move at all. Even the entire Wild Sandstar region was secretly observing the battle between the two strongest races, because it would affect the development of the entire Wild Sandstar region. From now on, if only one of the oracles and the natural survived, it would be a nightmare for the other races in the Wild Sandstar region. Originally, when the two races restrained each other, the other races could still find some opportunities to survive in the cracks. As long as they offered some training resources, they would be able to ensure their own survival. However, when there was only one race left in the Wild Sandstar region, it was hard to say what the situation would be like. It was very likely that the race would monopolize the training resources of the entire Wild Sandstar region, and the other races would have no way to resist at all. Of course, it was basically impossible to completely rule such a vast Wild Sandstar region, but the living space of the other races would be compressed to a very small area, and they would always be in a precarious state. If the race wanted to rule the entire Wild Sandstar region, they would definitely have to destroy all the other alien races or treat them as slaves. For all the other races, it was not a good thing. Therefore, at this time, some races began to propose whether they should intervene in the battle between the two races. Once one party fell into a disadvantage, they would help the other party to maintain the balance between the two parties. The situation in the entire Wild Sandstar region had become extremely tense. In such an atmosphere, only Long Yu and the others could peacefully improve themselves in the Voidwood Shrine. After all, they were not from the Wild Sandstar region, and neither were the humans or the demons. More importantly, Long Yu wanted to improve himself in the Voidwood Temple so that he could deal with the strongest demigods of the naturals and the oracles. In that case, he might be able to control the entire Wild Sandstar region. Everything depended on what he could gain from the Voidwood Temple. After the divine light of punishment gained the upper hand, it continued to suppress the divine forbidden light. After an unknown period of time, with Long Yu's help, the divine light of punishment completely suppressed the divine forbidden light, causing the divine forbidden light to completely disperse in this emerald green space. Long Yu's eyes finally became clear again. He could see everything in front of him without the help of the eyes of shadow. I have the driving force again, and it's so strong. Feeling the surging driving force in his body, Long Yu couldn't help but feel a little surprised. Even when he passed the challenge in the Rain God Temple, he didn't feel such a surging driving force. Such a strong driving force could at least allow him to advance several times. No. The confrontation between the Judgment Light and the Divine Prohibition Light just now wasn't a pure illusion. Long Yu and the Holy Emperor's consciousness were connected, so when the Divine Prohibition Light was suppressed, he couldn't feel it. But now, after the Divine Prohibition Light was suppressed, the same situation came from the Holy Emperor. She had also helped the Judgment Divine Light and repelled the Divine Forbidden Light. In other words, it was a confrontation between two real forces. The Divine Prohibition Light launched an attack on the Voidwood Temple, and I helped the Voidwood Temple repel a part of the Divine Prohibition Light. Long Yu guessed. He had to admit that such a speculation was quite possible. After all, the driving force on him and the Holy Emperor was too powerful. Therefore, it could be inferred that the other demigods who entered the Divine Palace of Hollowwood were in similar situations. After defeating the Divine Prohibition Light of a deity, Why did they attack the Voidwood Temple? I actually helped to suppress the divine prohibition light. Long Yu felt that it was unbelievable. He wasn't too surprised when he thought it was an illusion at first. But when he recalled the scene when the ancient tree was completely destroyed by the divine prohibition light, he immediately felt a little scared. In this way, they had really fought against the divine prohibition light. This was different from when he was in the Rain God Palace. Back then, Long Yu had transformed into the creator of the Rain God Palace and fought against hundreds of divine forbidden lights. But that was just an illusion. This time, the true divine forbidden light appeared in front of Long Yu. Although the other party's target was not him, he still participated in this battle and stood on the side of the Voidwood Palace. Long Yu didn't know what the consequences would be, but since he had already done it, he might as well go on. With the driving force, Long Yu continued to move forward. Gradually, he found that the Nine-Hell Tablet emitted a mysterious and awe-inspiring force, which seemed to connect him with the green vines around the Voidwood Temple. This mysterious and awe-inspiring force came from the core space in the depths of the Nine-Hell Tablet. The fifth floor. Long Yu estimated that as long as he cultivated the 9 extremes of heavenly nether to the 4th or 5th round, he would be able to go to the deeper core space. But after a try, he found that it wasn't possible. To enter the 5th floor, cultivating the 9 extremes of heavenly nether to the 4th and 5th round was only the basic condition. If he wanted to open the 5th layer of the core space, he would need external help. For example, the Voidwood Temple. Why do I feel that the Nine-Hell Tablet is somehow related to the Voidwood Temple? No, I should say that the two have nothing to do with each other, but somehow they seem to be on the same side. This inexplicable feeling made Long Yu even more confused. What exactly happened in the realm of the deities that led to the appearance of the divine prohibition light? Why would the judgment light target those who use the power of other deities? But it wasn't the time for him to think about this, because he finally opened the 5th floor of the core space of the Nine-Hell Tablet. He could enter it. I previously guessed that it was a kind of deity's power that conflicted with the golden flame divine power. I wonder if that's the case? Long Yu thought to himself. He tried to enter it, but found that he couldn't. The 5th layer of the core space of the Nine-Hell Tablet was already the last layer. However, he was unable to enter it. There was no entrance to the 5th layer of the core space in front of him. There was only a mysterious and dense aura coming from it. Combined with the mysterious power of the Voidwood Temple, Long Yu seemed to understand something, and his expression suddenly became solemn. It's indeed a deity's power, but it's not a ready-made one. I have to create it myself. Long Yu's heart stirred, and he immediately started to concentrate. He recalled the ancient grayish-white trees, purple and green, lightning divine power from before. Could it be that it was also comprehended and created in a situation similar to his own? Although it was destroyed by the divine forbidden light, the grayish-white ancient tree demigod still gave Long Yu a great shock, creating a deity's power himself. I can do it too. Long Yu clenched his fists. The pitch-black, mysterious, and eerie power began to spread throughout his body. Then, in his dantian, an aura that was different from any power he had experienced before finally began to be born. Chapter 1709. The divine power that belonged to Long Yu was born in his dantian. It was a dark and murderous power that matched the aura of the Nine-Hell Tablet. However, there was a surge of vitality in the murderous intent. Perhaps it was because he had comprehended it in the Voidwood Divine Palace. In the absolute darkness, there were wisps of emerald green, which made the divine power of Long Yu not only have the power to kill, but also endless vitality. However, this vitality is not the real vitality. This divine power does not have the effect of saving people. This vitality is used on the power of the murderous intent, so that after the murderous intent is released, the murderous intent will not stop until death. Death stream divine power. Long Yu gave a try. He clenched his fist and released the divine power. It was as if a river of death was slowly extending from his fist. It was just a pitch-black divine light, but it gave people the feeling of a river. 10 times. In the beginning, the death stream divine power had 10 times the power density, just like a new demigod. It seemed that to increase the density of the death stream divine power, one would need to cultivate continuously. In the end, if one wanted to transform into a god, one would also need to increase the density of the death stream divine power to 100 times. This could be seen from the grayish-white ancient tree demigod. However, to increase the divine power to 100 times the density is easier than increasing the density of one's own strength. At least, when the divine power is weaker than the density of one's own strength, the speed of improvement will be faster. For example, I have 56 times the density of the death stream divine power. If I want to increase the density of the death stream divine power to 56 times the density of the death stream divine power, it probably won't take much time. But once the divine power exceeds the density of one's own strength, it will be much more difficult to improve. Long you put away the ray of the death stream divine power. A wisp of pitch-black light flashed in his eyes. This was the sign of the existence of the death stream divine power. Golden flame divine power, lightning divine power, death stream divine power. Between divine powers, there seemed to be no difference in strength. The only difference was the nature and effect. To Long Yu, the death flow divine power was a pure destructive divine power. Moreover, because of the strands of life force contained within the death flow divine power, it caused the death flow divine power to grow and multiply endlessly. The killing power of the death flow divine power was higher than ordinary divine power. Since I have enough time, I might as well cultivate my death flow divine power here. Long Yu made his decision. Originally, he did not know how to simply cultivate divine power, but he quickly discovered that in the current situation, he only needed to constantly use his other powers to nourish it. Using the Hell-Shaking Divine Script, Nine Nether Divine Script, Dark Flow Divine Script, and Forest Demon Divine Script to nourish the Death Flow Divine Power, he could gradually increase the density of the Death Flow Divine Power. However, this method was not efficient. Although it was simple, it was relatively slow. What's more, Long Yu didn't dare to waste time in the Voidwood Shrine, where he couldn't sense the flow of time. In that case, he could only use another method, which was to absorb the item of creation and convert the power of creation into divine power of death. The power of creation was the purest power in the world. It was almost the same as the origin 5 elemental power, continuously absorbing the power of creation and converting it into divine power of death stream. Although it's a bit wasteful, time is of the essence now. Moreover, the Ice Fire race, the Umbrella race, and the Sky Pillar race still have 80% of the cultivation resources they have yet to use. That's right. Previously, he had only used 10 to 20% of the cultivation resources Long Yu had plundered to improve the strength of nearly 1 million living beings in a void galaxy. Now, there was at least 80% that had yet to be used. Therefore, to him, there was no need to save the power of creation. Absorb, absorb, absorb. The Death Flow Divine Power kept absorbing the power of creation from Long Yu's small world. Then it grew stronger and stronger. Starting from 10 times the power density, it quickly reached 20 times the power density, and then 30 times the power density. As the density of the Death Flow Divine Power increased, it became more difficult to increase it. From 10 times the power density to 20 times, Long Yu used about 5% of his creation. However, from 20 times to 30 times, Long Yu had used up 15% of his creation items. From 30 times to 40 times, he had used up 45% of his creation items. In the end, he was left with less than 30% of his creation items. However, the lethality of the Death Float Divine Power of 40 times the power density had already surpassed all of Long Yu's other powers. Even if he didn't use any methods to activate it, he could still kill demigods with 60 or 70 times the power density. This was the power of the divine power. Moreover, this was the divine power that Long Yu had comprehended himself. It wouldn't be punished by the divine light of judgment of the shrine. As for the triggering of the divine light of judgment, Long Yu also didn't know what was going on, but it would be fine as long as it didn't touch him. If the creation can't be used up, then the improvement of the divine power will stop here. It's a pity that the power of the Genesis 5 elements is too violent and can't be absorbed and transformed. Otherwise, I could find any 2 space-time corridors to transform the power of the Genesis 5 elements and use it to improve the death flow divine power. Even if Long Yu could turn into spatial divine characters and control the storm of the Genesis 5 elements in the space-time corridors, he couldn't transform the power of the Genesis 5 elements for his own use. Otherwise, it would be too easy to improve his divine power. In this case, there's only one way to quickly improve my divine power, and that's to collect enough creation. At the end of the day, I still need cultivation resources. However, I'll need a lot of cultivation resources. Only races like the Nature race and the Oracle race will be able to provide them in the future. Thinking to himself, Long Yu continued to move forward under the influence of the drive force. After he comprehended the death flow divine power that he possessed, the drive force in his body was still very strong. He could move forward several times in a row. He hoped that he could obtain more rewards like the ancient gods pattern in the Voidwood Shrine. As for other rewards, Long Yu didn't particularly need them. He could also be given some supreme quality creation items. That way, the others in the Voidwood Shrine could become demigods faster. Of course, there were ancient gods patterns in the Voidwood Shrine. The Saint Emperor had already obtained one. When Long Yu was studying and comprehending the death flow divine power, the Saint Emperor had already obtained an ancient gods pattern. Its effect was to increase the effect of any method that he used by 30%. The ancient gods pattern with such an effect was quite amazing. Although it was just a simple increase in power, it was a full 30% increase. If it was used on Long Yu, it would be equivalent to an increase of more than 10 times the density of power. Of course, the Saint Emperor wasn't that strong now, and the increase in power wasn't as strong as Long Yu's. However, as the Saint Emperor grew stronger, the effect of the ancient gods pattern would eventually be brought into play. At the very least, this would allow her to secure victory in a battle of the same density of power. Long Yu was also looking forward to obtaining more ancient gods patterns. If he had more ancient gods patterns, it wouldn't be a problem for him to cancel the ancient god seal of the pure world body and the devil dust heart. Because when he fought with his opponents now, he basically wouldn't give them a chance to attack him. In terms of defense, he could give up on it appropriately. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, his next reward popped up in his mind. It was an incomparably mysterious pattern that was directly engraved in his ancient god brain domain. It really was the ancient god's pattern, just as Long Yu was cultivating in the Voidwood God Palace. Far away in the Langustar region, in the territory of the human race and the monster race, there was a very big problem. It had been almost 10 years since Long Yu and the others left the Langustar region. In these 10 years, the Soul race's territory had been completely taken over by other races. The human race, the monster race, and the wine race had become the 3 strongest races in this territory. Whether it was the human race or the monster race, they had all expanded their territory by at least 50%. The Soul race was originally very strong, so their territory was very wide. Even if it was divided among the 5 races, each race would still get a lot. In these 10 years, the human race and the monster race had developed with all their might. For example, Frost, Imperial Wind, Banyan, Tion E, and the 2 cranes all became demigods and began to rush towards higher levels. In the past 10 years, powerful beings with 20 times the power density had emerged one after another. For the current Long Yu, 20 times the density of power wasn't even worth mentioning. If he could slow down the flow of time for a few new demigods, he could make them all have 20 times the density of power in 1 or 2 years. But for the human race and the monster race, 20 times the density of power was extremely rare, because it represented the top combat power of the two races. However, at this moment, a mere demigod with 20 times the density of power couldn't resist the upcoming crisis. This aura, it's coming from the rumored space barrier. Is there some extremely powerful being that wants to come to this star region, where we are? The demigod Gaudi floated in the void at the edge of the territory of the human race and the monster race. He looked at the empty space in the distance. There wasn't even a speck of starlight in that direction. It was complete darkness. But in that direction, a terrifying aura kept coming. This aura wasn't only noticed by the human race and the monster race. It had also attracted the attention of other races in the Langustar region. After the sword race, the six-winged race, and the machine race received the news, they all sent several powerful demigods with 40 times the density of power to the territory of the human race and the monster race to guard the border. Originally, there were only 3 star regions in this star region: the Langustar region, the Wild Sandstar region, and the Heavenly Dipper Star region. It had been a long time since other star regions appeared. Ever since the Alliance of Sufferers retreated tens of thousands of years ago, no one had been able to break through the space barrier and come to this space. But now, from the direction of the space barrier, there was a terrifying aura. Chapter 17:10. The Sword Clan, the Six-Winged Clan, and the Machine Clan had sent 12 demigods to the territory of the Human Clan and the Demon Clan, and all of them had a power density of more than 40 times. There was no reason for such beings to come to the territory of the Human Clan and the Demon Clan. On their way, many cultivation planets were destroyed because of a disagreement. Although they were there to spy on the space barrier, most of the people who were sent there didn't have a high position in their clans and had been ostracized. It was a good chance for them to vent their anger. At this moment, the Human Clan and the Demon Clan were in trouble, and so were the neighboring Desolate God Clan. Of the 6 alien clans, only the Desolate God Clan's territory was at the edge of the Langus space zone, and they could clearly feel the terrifying aura coming from the space barrier. Therefore, the Desolate God Clan, just like the Human Clan and the Demon Clan, was destroyed by the demigods of those barbaric races. To avoid those guys, the Human Clan and the Demon Clan had to evacuate all the humans and demons near the space-time teleportation arrays to the edge of the space zone to reduce their losses. But even so, at least millions of human cultivators were killed by the Sword Clan. The 3 clans split up. The Sword Clan went to the territory of the Human Clan, the Machine Clan went to the territory of the Demon Clan, and the Six-Winged Clan went to the territory of the Desolate God Clan. But their destination was the same, the edge of the Langus space zone. When the 12 demigods of the powerful races reached the edge and felt the terrifying aura coming from the space barrier, they all fell silent. So strong, they couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Although it was infinitely far away, they could feel that there was an extremely terrifying existence in that direction. If the space barrier was broken, no one knew what kind of beings would invade. This news had to be spread to the other 2 star fields, outside the Voidwood Temple. At this moment, it had been almost a year since Long Yu and the others stepped into the Voidwood Temple. The Oracle Clan and the Nature Clan were still in a stalemate. This was because some of the powerhouses of the surrounding races with a power density of 60 times had also come to help. In order to balance out the forces of the entire Wild Sandstar field, they constantly helped the weaker side. Thus, the Nature race and the Divine Emissary race were unable to determine a winner. This was completely different from Long Yu's initial speculation. He thought that when he came out, one of the 2 races would definitely perish. However, both the Oracles and the Naturals only had 1 demigod whose power density was 90 times higher than theirs left. The other demigod whose power density was 85 times higher had also perished in the past year. Voidwood Divine Palace. In the area where the fuse of the war was located, the 2 races did not forget the key person at that time, and that person was Long Yu. If it weren't for Long Yu, the 2 races wouldn't have fought at all, and they wouldn't have been weakened like this. Now, it was about time for him to come out of the Voidwood Temple, wasn't it? According to the ancient experience of the two races, the trip to the temple would last about a year, and after a year, it would be about time for him to come out of the temple. Even if he didn't come out, he wouldn't gain anything by staying in the temple, and he wouldn't be able to train normally. It would be a pure waste of time. Therefore, at this moment, the two races that had been in a tie finally decided to temporarily stop. If Long Yu came out of the Voidwood Temple, they would directly kill him. In any case, the alien races that didn't belong to the Wild Sandstar Zone had to be driven out. However, they never expected that the situation would become like this when Long Yu came out. The Nature Clan, the silver tree-like demigod whose power density was 90 times higher than theirs, and the Oracles, the strongest demigod whose power density was 91 times higher than theirs, were both floating around the Voidwood Temple. They were waiting for Long Yu to show up. For them, the passage of time was not a big deal. After all, they had lived for more than 1,000 years. Such a short wait was not a big deal. As soon as Long Yu came out, he would be immediately faced with their attacks. Sure enough, just 3 days after they temporarily stopped fighting against each other, a young human man in black clothes flew out of the Voidwood Temple. Huh, are you waiting for me? The young man was exactly Long Yu. He saw two strong demigods in two different directions. The silver tree-like demigod of the Nature Clan and the golden expert of the Oracles launched attacks at him almost at the same time. Overwhelming stripes of the ancient gods were thrown at Long Yu, accompanied by their own divine symbols. They joined hands. Long Yu was quite shocked, but then he curled his lips. This is a good chance to see how strong I am right now. The sphere of Tartarus appeared behind him and turned the surrounding area into an area where the flow of time was slowed down. Then, the moment the opponents slowed down, Long Yu raised his hand, and the stripes of the ancient gods in 7 colors spread out. Boundless grasp. An invisible hand grasped the bodies of the two opponents and brought the effect of the stripes of the ancient gods into their bodies. Long Yu had relied on suppressing the divine restriction light to obtain a dense driving force, allowing him to advance in the Voidwood God Palace. He had obtained a total of 5 ancient god runes. The 5 stripes of the ancient gods happened to match the power of the 5 elements. The pattern of gold incineration suppresses all the divine symbols derived from the primordial power of the metal class, making them less than half of their original power and burning the other half of their original power to cause damage to the opponent. The pattern of broken water suppresses all the divine symbols derived from the primordial power of the water class, making them less than half of their original power and temporarily cutting off the connection between the opponent and the primordial power of the water class, making them unable to perceive or use the power of the divine symbols of space. The pattern of dead fire, the pattern of dead wood, the pattern of broken earth, the 5 stripes of the ancient gods corresponding to the primordial power of the 5 elements were obtained by Long Yu one after another. He also expanded the ancient god brain domain to 1,200 square meters and carved all the 7 stripes of the ancient god domain into it, just enough to fill up the entire ancient god brain domain. Only when one had a strong driving force could he obtain this set of stripes of the ancient gods. For Long Yu and the others, it was definitely a coincidence that they cooperated with the Voidwood Shrine to suppress the divine prohibition light. However, it was an extremely important coincidence that allowed all of them to obtain enough benefits from the Voidwood Shrine. Without their help, the divine prohibition light was likely to cause damage to the Voidwood Shrine. Long Yu and the others didn't know the specifics, but their power became the straw that broke the divine prohibition light's back, causing it to be completely suppressed and dispersed. The benefits brought by this were unimaginable even for Long Yu. 7 different stripes of the ancient gods, and 5 of them had a comprehensive suppression effect. No matter what power the opponent had, after being suppressed by the 5 stripes of the ancient gods, they wouldn't be able to exert more than half of their original power. Moreover, there were all kinds of negative effects. For example, if one couldn't sense the existence of the divine language of space in a short period of time, The divine language derived from the primordial power of the metal family would be burned and hurt. A series of effects gave Long Yu an advantage as soon as he attacked. The stripes of the ancient gods in 7 colors instantly swept out. The mark of the black brand weakened the power density of the 2 strongest demigods to 80 and 81 times, instead of 90 and 91 times, respectively. At this time, Long Yu activated his Octagon bloodline and increased his power density from 56 times to 64 times. There was still a big gap between the power density of the 2 sides, but it shouldn't be forgotten that Long Yu's set of stripes of the ancient god suppressed at least half of the opponent's power, which meant that their power density was only 70 or 80 times. However, the opponent also had many stripes of the ancient gods. A ripple spread out from the body of the ancient silver tree. It was a silver-gray ripple, and as soon as it appeared, it repelled Long Yu's ancient god marks. Although it was only for an instant, it allowed Long Yu's power to be released in that instant. Kill! A horrible killing intent burst out from the body of the silver ancient tree. At the moment when the opponent purified itself, several silver lights were born in the void around Long Yu and swept toward Long Yu. 65 times the divine power. Long Yu's heart pounded. As expected, the other party had also comprehended its own divine force. However, its strength density was only 65 times. Compared to the grayish-white ancient tree, it was still a far cry. However, it could be seen that the silver ancient tree did not deliberately cultivate its own divine force. Otherwise, its strength density would have already reached 100 times. Is it because it's afraid of the light of the divine prohibition? Long Yu guessed in his heart, but he wasn't afraid of the other party's divine power. Black light flickered in his eyes, and for the first time, Deathflow divine power finally blossomed with light, gushing out from his entire body. Although they were only rays of divine light, they were like waves, spreading out in all directions, instantly colliding with the other party's silvery gray divine power. At the beginning of the collision, the death current divine power was no match for the opponent's silver gray divine power and instantly collapsed and scattered. But then, Long Yu's death current divine power continued to advance wave after wave. The opponent's silver gray divine power, however, was immediately suppressed by Long Yu's 7 stripes of the ancient gods after it erupted, and it couldn't smoothly activate it. Moreover, the effect of slowing down the flow of time had spread to the entire space around, making the opponent's speed as ridiculous as that of a snail compared to Long Yu. For every divine light that the opponent released, Long Yu could release 10. Besides, every divine light of the death current divine power that Long Yu released had the effect of waves, and each wave could accelerate the next wave. Even if it was just a divine light, it had the power of waves and could attack the opponent several times. Very soon, Long Yu's death current divine power dimmed and completely crushed the opponent's silver gray divine power. Then, it turned into countless black lights and rushed toward the 2 strongest demigods. At this moment, the 2 strongest demigods were finally completely infuriated. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.